Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, which had nothing to do with swordsmanship. The 6 powers could be understood as techniques like instant transmission and moonwalk were auxiliary skills useful in both swordsmanship and martial arts. However, martial arts and swordsmanship are fundamentally different. A young sword master abandoning his exceptional talent in swordsmanship to pursue martial arts seemed outright foolish. Zephyr also tried to persuade Wood when he learned of his decision. Zephyr himself was proficient in martial arts, but he would never advise Wood to give up swordsmanship. A person's energy and time are limited. Even the most gifted individual cannot excel in both swordsmanship and martial arts simultaneously. Rather than trying to juggle both and ending up achieving nothing, it would be better to focus on the path most suited to oneself. However, despite Zephyr's earnest advice, Wood remained unconvinced. A person's path is theirs to choose, and though Zephyr felt some regret, he knew he had no right to interfere with Wood's decision. This was why Wood, despite being a sword master, was regarded by everyone as a fool for also training in martial arts. He clearly had exceptional talent in swordsmanship but chose to waste it by learning something he wasn't good at. When the school year began, the sparring match between Wood and Jian had made everyone believe that Wood was the second strongest among them, right after Jian. But after a year, Wood, whom they considered a fool, chose to pursue martial arts, resulting in little improvement in his swordsmanship. As a result, most of the others had surpassed Wood in overall ability. In short, Wood, who was originally second in rank, had now become just an average performer in the group. It was as if he had been dealt a strong hand, only to play it poorly. Many mocked him for it, but was that really the case? True, martial arts and swordsmanship are vastly different, and it's impossible for a person to excel in both simultaneously. But Wood was an exception, someone who couldn't be judged by common standards. Because he was a man with a cheat. A person's energy is indeed limited, but by using the life simulator. Each simulation for Wood was like gaining an entire lifetime's worth of energy and time. Others might not be able to balance martial arts and swordsmanship, but for Wood, it was no problem at all. And even while studying martial arts, Wood had never slacked in his swordsmanship training. The wild boars on the mountain every night could attest to that. The belief that his abilities had stagnated was just a fixed idea in their minds after Wood chose martial arts, reinforced by Wood's deliberate concealment. Wood graduated with average grades, which didn't qualify him for an idle junior officer position. As for Jian, who graduated at the top of the class, she was immediately assigned to the position of sergeant. And that sergeant position was only temporary. Given Jian's abilities and performance, her rank would likely rise rapidly within 2 years. Smoker and Hina, who also had excellent grades, were selected to stay for further officer training this year. Before leaving the Navy Academy, Jian even sought out Wood and expressed her desire to spar with him once more. Unsurprisingly, Wood outright refused this thankless request, insisting that someone of his mid-level abilities could never hope to compete with a genius. Even though you wasted a year, your talent in swordsmanship is still exceptional, and you're several years younger than us. If you abandon martial arts and return to the right path, you could still catch up with me, perhaps even surpass me. Jian herself didn't know why she was saying these things to Wood. Perhaps she regretted seeing his talent go to waste, or maybe she had came to see him as a rival over these 2 years. I never said I gave up on swordsmanship. Just because you see something doesn't mean it's true, Jian. As soon as Wood finished speaking, Jian felt a breeze pass before her, and a sudden sense of danger washed over her. She instinctively reached for the hilt of her sword, Kinpira, only to find a blade with a sky blue sheath already at her throat. Jian was stunned. She hadn't seen a thing when Wood made his move. Although she had been completely unguarded, the aura Wood exuded at that moment made Jian's skin crawl, even as a fellow sword master. The young man whom everyone regarded as a fool hadn't just maintained his swordsmanship over the past year. He had grown even stronger. Please keep this a secret. I don't want to be assigned to some dangerous position because of this. Perhaps it was Jian's earlier concern for him, Or maybe Wood thought that since they would be assigned to different places, they wouldn't cross paths again. Whatever the reason, Wood ultimately decided, against his better judgment, to show Diane the results of his year's training. Chapter 35, High-level cannon fodder assigned to work at Impel Down. Previously, over 100 people participated in the officer-level training, but after a year, only about half remained. The other half mostly perished during the real combat courses, dying in battles against pirates. Some others were expelled from the Navy after they showed cowardice and fled during combat when they first faced vicious pirates. Wood, with his modest display of skill at the Navy Academy, managed to graduate with the rank of third-class seaman. Strictly speaking, this rank isn't even considered officer, it's at best a slightly higher level of cannon fodder. What made Wood uneasy was that his duty involved patrolling the vicinity of Impel Down. Impel Down is the place where the world government imprisons criminals. Most prisoners are held here before their execution. And the people held there aren't just pirates, there are also other extremely dangerous criminals. Impel Down is not under the jurisdiction of Navy headquarters, and it has its own positions for guarding the prisoners. The prison is divided into 6 levels. The first level houses ordinary criminals, while the 6th level is said to hold those whose crimes could threaten the world. The former pirate king, Roger, was held in the 6th level of Impel Down before his execution. Impel Down has its own defense mechanisms, and its isolated island location makes escape virtually impossible for prisoners. For some unambitious Navy personnel who just want to take it easy, working at Impel Down is undoubtedly a perfect job. After all, in hundreds of years, no one has ever managed to leave Impel Down, so the patrol duties are just routine. In the past, Wood would have been quite content with such an easy, laid-back job. However, after experiencing his second life simulation, Wood was well aware that Impel Down, which hadn't had any problems for centuries, was about to lose face soon. The captain of the flying pirates, the great pirate Golden Lion Shiki, who is imprisoned in the 6th level, will soon cut off his own legs and break out. In his second life simulation, Wood was killed by the escaping Golden Lion Shiki. Now, as a patrolling Navy officer, it seems like history is repeating itself. Although Wood's current strength far surpasses what it was during his second life simulation, where he wasn't even close to being as strong as he is now. He's not only become a sword master, but also awakened observation hockey and mastered the 6 powers. Yet, even so, he still doesn't have the qualifications to go up against someone as formidable as Golden Lion Shiki. He considered warning Zephyr and Garp about the impending escape of Golden Lion Shiki, but it would be impossible to explain convincingly. After all, the event hasn't happened yet. Even if Zephyr and Garp believed him, how would he explain his foreknowledge? Wood has gone to great lengths to hide his strength precisely because he wants to remain a background character. Such a conspicuous move would go against his low-profile style. Moreover, not everyone in the Navy is a good person. Possessing the ability to foresee the future could be dangerous. He might wake up one day to find himself strapped to an experimental table by some mad scientist. Since warning the higher-ups isn't an option, Wood could only try to change his own circumstances to alter the future. So, he took his transfer request to the only big shot he could find. Zephyr. Hoping to be reassigned to another unit, even as an ordinary cannon fodder soldier. But Zephyr rejected his request. Zephyr is stubborn by nature and believes that obeying orders from superiors is the duty of every Navy soldier. He also feels that Wood is too carefree, wasting his immense talent by idling away his time. Zephyr sees this as a good opportunity. By witnessing the world's evils firsthand at Impel Down, Wood might find his inner sense of justice and realize that there are more people to protect than just those on Maple Leaf Island. With a righteous expression, Zephyr rejected Wood's request for a transfer, leaving Wood with only 2 choices, either obediently take up his new post, or defy orders and desert the Navy. Desertion was not an option. Wood was just a small fry, without the protagonist's halo. He couldn't pull off a daring escape from Impel Down and Navy headquarters like a certain rubber boy and walk away unscathed. Facing Golden Lion Shiki alone seemed like a safer bet compared to going up against all the big shots at Navy headquarters. And although history seems to be repeating itself, some things have changed. In his second life simulation, Wood died at the hands of Golden Lion Shiki as part of a support unit. But this time, he's stationed directly at Impel Down as a guard. Apart from the change in his position, Wood's own strength is now far beyond what it was in the second simulation. According to the second simulation's outcome, Wood was likely killed by Golden Lion Shiki during the escape, without the pirate even knowing who he was. Given the strength he had in the simulation, he certainly wasn't a match for the Golden Lion. But the current Wood is far stronger than his simulated self. Unless he intentionally seeks death by provoking Golden Lion Shiki or becomes a specific target, he shouldn't be easily killed like some random grunt. With this realization, Wood felt much more at ease. At worst, he could just pretend to work while avoiding any real danger. If he really encounters Golden Lion Shiki, he can simply play dead on the spot. Having graduated from the Navy Academy and being Zephyr's student, along with his previous experience in killing pirates, all he has to do is endure a few years at Impel Down before he can request a transfer to another Navy base. The Navy branch on Maple Leaf Island would be his first choice. It's his hometown, after all, and he's used to living there. Moreover, as part of the first half of the Grand Line, the pirates he would encounter there are mostly rookies. To put it bluntly, if Wood were to stop hiding his strength, he'd be a shoo-in for the rank of Navy captain. And not just any captain, but one with the qualifications of a headquarters captain. With mastery of the 6 powers, observation hockey, and swordsmanship at the level of a swordmaster, if he were to face the Iron Arm Cook from back then, Wood could easily defeat him, even with both hands and feet tied. Chapter 36, The Navy Detachment Stationed at Impel Down, the world's top prison. This prison incarcerates only the most dangerous criminals. It is a terrifying place, with monstrous jailers and surveillance by Den Mushi. The surrounding seas are filled with massive sea kings, earning Impel Down the reputation of being an impregnable fortress. The Navy headquarters, Inai's Lobby, and Impel Down are the 3 major strongholds of the world government on the seas, known as the Forbidden Zones for pirates. Compared to Inai's Lobby and the Navy headquarters, Impel Down has its own internal management system, and the positions within Impel Down are largely independent of the Navy. In fact, regular Navy personnel typically cannot enter Impel Down unless under special circumstances. They are only responsible for guarding the perimeter of the prison. However, there are always exceptions. In the years following the execution of Pirate King Roger, the number of pirates on the seas has surged. What used to be a prison for all kinds of global criminals has, over the past few years, almost become known as a pirate prison. With so many dangerous pirates being thrown into Impel Down daily, and since the journey from Navy headquarters to Impel Down passes through the Com Belt, every prisoner transfer or capture requires numerous procedures. Over time, the newly appointed Fleet Admiral Sengoku found this process to be overly cumbersome, so he negotiated with the warden of Impel Down. They agreed to establish a small Navy detachment at the outskirts of Impel Down, whose primary function would be to facilitate the processing of captured pirates entering the prison and to assist with perimeter patrols. Sengoku's proposal was advantageous for Impel Down, and he also assured the warden that the Navy personnel assigned to Impel Down would not be too strong, nor would there be too many of them. Seeing that Sengoku's proposal could simplify many steps without affecting his authority, the warden of Impel Down happily accepted the suggestion. And this so-called Navy liaison point at the outskirts of Impel Down is the post to which Wood has now been assigned. After bidding farewell to Smoker and the wild boars on the hill, Wood spent half a day aboard a Navy ship, passing through multiple checkpoints, before finally arriving at the so-called World Prison. Don't misunderstand, given Wood's current rank, the Navy certainly wouldn't dispatch a special warship just to take him to Impel Down. He was merely a tag-along this time. Along with him on the ship were a Navy Rear Admiral and a shipload of pirates destined for Impel Down. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, having just taken office, was eagerly accumulating achievements to stabilize his position. Moreover, with the number of pirates on the seas being rampant and numerous, every mission by Vice Admirals and Rear Admirals like Garp resulted in the capture of many bounty-bearing pirates. Impel Down is a massive, tower-like structure submerged in the sea, with its base located underwater. The higher the criminal's threat level, the deeper they are imprisoned. Furthermore, the shackles and cells used to restrain the prisoners are made of sea stone, a testament to the immense wealth and resources of the world government. This precaution is due to the fact that many of the inmates are devil fruit users. Sea stone is a rare mineral that emits the same energy as the sea, nullifying the powers of devil fruit users. As soon as the Navy's warship docked, Impel Down's chief jailer approached, accompanied by several blue, gorilla-like creatures wielding axes. We were told that the Navy would be bringing in more prisoners this time, but I didn't expect there would be so many. Can't you Navy folks ever take it easy? Impel Down is a prison for global criminals, not the Navy's private jail. If you keep bringing in so many prisoners, not only will we run out of cells, but you're also increasing our workload. The chief jailer of Impel Down is a short figure wielding a trident and sporting a pair of demon wings on his back, clearly not a normal human. But Wood wasn't too surprised by this. The world of pirates is filled with various species, and many of the jailers and other staff at Impel Down don't appear to be human either. Although the chief jailer's rank doesn't technically match up to that of a rear admiral in the Navy, he showed little respect for the rear admiral standing before him. Although they all work for the world government, they belong to different departments. Besides, the Navy had indeed been very busy lately, constantly sending pirates to Impel Down, causing the staff there to work overtime and even lose their holidays. The Navy's duty is to enforce justice. We can't just turn a blind eye to pirates wreaking havoc. Pirates are criminals too. We're just following the rules. What's wrong with that? The turmoil caused by Pirate King Roger is nearly over. Things should calm down in a little while. Moreover, Fleet Admiral Sengoku is concerned about your heavy workload, which is why he's sending reinforcements this time. As the Rear Admiral spoke, he stepped aside to reveal Wood and the other unfortunate newcomers. Indeed, they were the reinforcements sent by the Navy headquarters. Although Wood had heard that this assignment was supposed to be an easy one, seeing the attitude of the people at Impel Down made him realize that relations between the Navy and Impel Down staff might not be as harmonious as he had thought. Taking custody of the prisoners from the Navy involves a series of procedures, and if a pirate is to be executed in the future, another round of complicated procedures will be required to transfer them from Impel Down. Wood and the others assigned to Impel Down were officially there to assist with guarding the prisoners, but in reality, they were just there to handle paperwork and stamp documents at the perimeter. After the pirates were handed over to the Impel Down staff, the Rear Admiral, seemingly uninterested in further interaction, exchanged a few pleasantries before departing with his ship. Left behind were Wood and a few other bewildered newcomers. The Broglie, known as Great Sea Fighters, brought in chains at the Chief Jailer's signal, and the demon-like Chief Jailer turned to Wood and the others, saying, "Now, let's follow the procedures. You know what to do, right?" Seeing the impatience on the Chief Jailer's face, Wood was dumbfounded. How would he know what to do? It was his first day on the job. "Apologies, Chief Jailer. They're new and not yet familiar with the procedures, but we'll cooperate immediately." As Wood and the other rookies stood there, clueless, some Navy personnel stationed at Impel Down finally arrived, signaling to Wood and the others to present the documents they had brought. Chapter 37, Wood's 2 suggestions. Rat Plague Dick, Bounty, 17 million Baileys, non-devil fruit user, confined in Level 1. Scarlet Hell. Spring Hand Babe, Bounty, 30 million Baileys, non-devil fruit user, confined in Level 2. Beast Hell. Plague EO, Bounty, 130 million Baileys, an extremely vicious and cunning pirate with a bounty over 100 million. Devil fruit user of the Logia type, sick fruit, confined in Level 5. Freezing Hell. As the Navy provided the information, the warden began ordering the Blue Ape-like Blugori to shackle the criminals. For non-devil fruit users, they used regular shackles, but for those with devil fruit abilities, Seastone shackles were used. Seastone is a relatively rare resource, even for Impel Down, so they couldn't afford to give every prisoner Seastone cuffs. Isn't it a bit reckless to decide if someone's a devil fruit user just based on the Navy's reports? What if? And I'm just saying, what if? They're hiding their abilities. Wood couldn't help but voice his concern as he watched the pirates being shackled and sent to their cells. If he remembered correctly, Buggy the Clown had managed to hide his devil fruit abilities, which allowed him to roam freely within Impel Down in the original story. Wood had always thought this was just a plot device, but now he realized the intake process at Impel Down really was pretty careless. So, do you have a different opinion? Or are you questioning the Navy's intelligence? The warden of Impel Down, Saldeath, who wielded a trident, suddenly flew over to Wood, clearly intrigued by what he'd said. To be honest, Saldeath wasn't too fond of the Navy headquarters. They'd been increasing his workload recently, so hearing a Navy officer like Wood question the Navy's intelligence didn't anger him. Instead, it caught his interest. No, I'm not doubting the Navy's intelligence. I just think a bit more caution wouldn't hurt. Wood quickly clarified, waving his hands to indicate that Saldeath had misunderstood him. He was still looking to advance his career, not to get labeled as a troublemaker. Pirates are tricky by nature, so it's not impossible they might hide their abilities. As everyone knows, a devil fruit user's weakness is seawater. So, why not pour a bucket of seawater over each of them before they enter their cells? Saldeath left with the Blugori and a large group of categorized pirates, but before he departed, he glanced back at Wood, indicating that he would discuss Wood's other suggestion with the chief warden of Impel Down. Given that Wood's seawater suggestion wasn't too troublesome, Saldeath decided to give it a try and had the Blugori pour seawater over the prisoners. To their surprise, one of the prisoners, previously categorized as a non-devil fruit user, collapsed to the ground, utterly weakened as if all his energy had been drained. Realizing he had been exposed, the devil fruit user glared angrily at Wood from within the crowd. His devil fruit ability wasn't suited for breaking out of prison, and even without Seastone shackles, he wouldn't have been able to escape Impel Down. But as a devil fruit user, he loathed the idea of being exposed to seawater or being shackled with Seastone. Originally, even while serving his sentence, he could still have remained lively like an ordinary person. However, now that he was shackled with Seastone cuffs, his state immediately turned frail, even weaker than a normal human. As for Wood's second suggestion to Saldeath, he recommended considering additional restraints for particularly powerful devil fruit users. Not just leg cuffs but also wrist restraints. Wood recalled that Shiki the Golden Lion had severed his own legs to escape sea stone shackles, allowing him to use the power of the float fruit. If his wrists had also been shackled, it's doubtful even Shiki would have gone so far as to sever his hands. Later, Impel Down did implement such precautions, shackling both the hands and feet of prisoners, a practice adopted after Shiki's escape. Wood was merely suggesting it earlier than usual. However, Saldeath, as the warden, did not have the authority to make such decisions. Creating sea stone shackles was a complex process, and even adding one more set of cuffs for each prisoner would involve considerable costs. You've got guts, speaking to Saldeath like that. Don't be fooled by his small stature. Just because he works at Impel Down, dealing with dangerous criminals daily, and commanding those monster-like Bluegory, doesn't mean he's someone to mess with. As Wood and a group of new recruits were being led around by a senior Navy officer stationed at Impel Down, the veterans took the opportunity to remind them not to provoke the staff of the prison. While talking, the senior officers particularly emphasized to Wood how dangerous Saldeath truly was, despite his seemingly harmless appearance. Do you know what those blue ape-like creatures are? They're called Bluegory, also known as the Warriors of the Sea. Each one has strength comparable to a pirate with a bounty of over 10 million Baileys. The Navy's office within Impel Down was a small room located just above Level 1. Scarlet Hell. The room was filled with various documents and files, mostly concerning the pirates imprisoned within the facility. Although technically part of Impel Down, the Navy's office was considered to be in the outer area. The Navy operated under a different system from Impel Down, and even those stationed here had to go through rigorous checks to enter the prison's lower levels. However, the Navy officers stationed at Impel Down had little interest in the prisoners. Unless absolutely necessary, they preferred not to venture into the lower levels of the prison. Impel Down had 6 levels, each more hellish than the last. The deeper you go, the harsher the environment and the more brutal the punishment for the prisoners. Though the Navy officers themselves weren't subjected to these punishments, witnessing the torment of the prisoners was enough to make anyone's skin crawl. And then there were the terrifying, inhuman beasts that roamed the prison. Every encounter with them left a lasting sense of dread. Chapter 38, Building Good Relations with Impel Down. It's likely that every level of Impel Down is an absolute hell for prisoners. Watching the cruel torture inflicted daily is something ordinary people could never endure. This might explain why the guards at Impel Down are all strange, non-human creatures. Most of the beasts that serve as guards take pleasure in tormenting the prisoners. Even the Navy personnel stationed at Impel Down generally avoid entering the levels where prisoners are held. They're afraid of having nightmares. Because of this, the Navy stationed at Impel Down tends to keep their distance from the prison's management staff. They believe that anyone who can control those vicious guard beasts must be even more ruthless. Though the Navy doesn't like entering the prison, sometimes they have no choice. With so many pirates locked up, there are daily executions, and when that time comes, no matter how reluctant they are, they must witness the true hell of Impel Down. In the past, when a pirate was due for execution, the job of retrieving the prisoner from Impel Down was something everyone tried to avoid. But since Wood started working at Impel Down, they no longer had to draw lots for the task. When Wood first arrived, everyone assumed he was just a greenhorn fresh out of the Navy Academy, especially considering how young he looked. However, the veterans were shocked when Wood, on his first trip into Impel Down to retrieve a pirate for execution, showed no signs of psychological distress. In fact, he even started getting chummy with the monstrous guard beasts. Seeing that the rookie was more capable than expected, the job of retrieving prisoners from Impel Down quickly became Wood's responsibility. Wood tried to resist, but it was no use. He had hoped that as a seaman third class in this desolate place, he might at least become a squad leader. But as it turned out, the Navy detachment stationed at Impel Down consisted of only 10 people, most of whom were petty officers or sergeants, with even a lieutenant among them. In terms of experience and seniority, Wood was the most junior, having just graduated from the Navy Academy. In terms of rank, as a seaman third class, he was firmly at the bottom of the hierarchy. The task was presented as a way to promote good relations between the Navy and Impel Down. But in reality, it was just a way for the others to dump the least desirable work onto Wood. The squad leader wasn't heartless, though. He outright told Wood that since he had volunteered for such an important task, he wouldn't have to worry about any desk jobs from now on. He even promised to write a letter at the end of the year to commend Wood's outstanding performance. With things laid out like that, what could Wood do? Besides, compared to the monotonous work of processing pirate files in a small office, Wood found that he actually preferred the atmosphere at Impel Down. The guard beasts might be ferocious, but as long as you could prove your strength, you could get them to follow you like loyal underlings. Thanks to his earlier friendly interactions with Saldeith and his prior knowledge of Impel Down's layout from watching the anime, Wood found that he could navigate the prison quite easily. He quickly got on good terms with several of the prison's management staff by learning about their personalities and preferences. At this point in time, the current chief warden of Impel Down was not yet Magellan. Magellan was still the vice warden. Wood had encountered him a couple of times, but their rank difference was too great for them to strike up a conversation. As for Shiryu of the Rain, who would later be imprisoned in level 6, he was still the head jailer of Impel Down. It must be said that there was good reason for the Navy to avoid interacting with the management staff of Impel Down. They were a strange bunch, to say the least. Shiryu, for instance, had a notorious reputation for his brutal methods. Most people knew that his tendency to kill prisoners indiscriminately was what eventually got him locked up in level 6. It's important to note that Shiryu was imprisoned for killing prisoners. Simply torturing them for fun, however, was something that Impel Down actually allowed. After all, to the outside world, everyone locked up in Impel Down was considered a villain and a scoundrel. As long as they weren't killed, torturing them was fair game. A prime example of someone who took pleasure in torturing prisoners was Sadie, the chief jailer. Despite her appearance as a beautiful woman with curly blonde hair, a fringe that covers her eyes, white candle-shaped earrings, a tight pink leather suit, and spiked high heels, Sadie was actually the commander of the 4 guard beasts in level 4. Blazing hell. She had authority on par with the warden. Sadie's personality, however, was terrible. She was a sadist through and through, taking great pleasure in hearing others' cries of pain. And the 4 guard beasts under her command, Minotaurus, Mino Koala, Mino Rhinoceros, and Mino Zebra, were all exceptionally violent and ruthless. Neither Saldeith, the head warden, nor Sadie had changed much from what Wood remembered from the show. Their devilish appearances made Wood wonder if they were actually demons in disguise, otherwise, it was hard to explain why their looks hadn't changed at all over the years. At present, Wood had managed to build good relationships with Saldeith and Sadie. As for Magellan and the others, either their rank was too high, or their personalities were too different, making it hard for Wood to connect with them. Unlike Sadie, who was cruel only to prisoners, Shiryu's cruelty was a fundamental part of his nature, making him dangerous to anyone, not just prisoners. Shiryu simply enjoyed killing. Wood still vividly remembered the first time he met Shiryu. The way Shiryu looked at him was something Wood would never forget. It was the kind of gaze one would have when spotting an interesting prey. Compared to the helpless prisoners, Wood, with his swordsman aura, was far more intriguing to Shiryu. Luckily, Shiryu hadn't yet become the unrestrained killer he would be in the future. Upon realizing that Wood was wearing a Navy uniform, Shiryu had left with a look of disappointment. Chapter 39, Using Impel Down prisoners as sparring partners. Even though the standard issue uniform seemed insignificant, there were times when it could indeed save your life. From that moment on, Wood made it a point to avoid Shiryu of the Rain, ensuring that he never crossed paths with him alone. It wasn't out of fear, but rather because Wood didn't want to provoke a conflict too soon, which could ruin the hard-earned goodwill he had built at Impel Down. Shiryu might have a reputation for being able to go toe-to-toe with the strongest warden, Magellan, but it was important to remember that this was not 20 years in the future. When Wood first encountered Shiryu, while the man did seem formidable, he didn't come across as outright dangerous. In terms of swordsmanship, Shiryu was undoubtedly at the level of a swordmaster, if not higher, and was slightly stronger than Wood. However, if it came down to a life-or-death battle, Wood believed he could hold his own against the current Shiryu. As for Magellan, Wood knew he stood no chance against him at this stage. Magellan's Daku Daku no Mi, Venom Fruit, was incredibly tricky to deal with, especially since Wood hadn't yet mastered armament hockey. Faced with a Parimsha fruit as potent as this one, Wood had no viable strategy. Wood had gotten to know Saldeith, the head jailer, because of a previous encounter. As for Sadie, the chief warden, their acquaintance began when Wood entered Impel Down to retrieve a prisoner scheduled for execution. During that visit, the guard beast Minotaurus mistook Wood for an escaping prisoner. Although Minotaurus had considerable strength, its intelligence was sorely lacking. Failing to understand Wood's explanations, Minotaurus responded by swinging a spiked club at him. To prevent the condemned pirate from dying prematurely and causing unnecessary trouble, Wood had no choice but to fight back. Barehanded, he managed to knock Minotaurus out cold. Soon after, Sadie arrived with the other 3 guard beasts, and although a fight broke out, it also led to Wood befriending Sadie. Over the next 6 months, Wood's efforts to curry favor bore fruit, and Sadie began to see him as a like-minded companion. By now, Wood was a regular at Impel Down, known to both the jailer beasts and the guard beasts, who had came to see him as one of their own. Meanwhile, the Navy detachment stationed at Impel Down had all but forgotten about Wood, even though he technically remained part of their ranks. Saldeith, as the head jailer, had significant authority over levels 1 and 2, overseeing various jailer beasts like the Blue-Gory and Sphinx. Sadie, the chief warden, held equal power to the warden and was in charge of the prisoners in levels 3 and 4. Wood's initial intention in befriending Saldeath and Sadie wasn't entirely pure. Rather than spending his days bored out of his mind in a small office, Wood feared that over time, his body would weaken, and his strength would regress. One of the reasons Wood said he liked the atmosphere at Impel Down was because, to him, the prisoners there weren't just criminals. They were perfect sparring partners. Don't forget, the people imprisoned at Impel Down were not ordinary individuals. Even those with bounties under a few million Baileys didn't make it into this prison. Impel Down housed criminals from all over the world, including martial artists, swordsmen, devil fruit users, and even fishermen karate experts. Thanks to his previous life simulations and the 2 years of rigorous training at the Navy Academy, Wood's strength had grown rapidly. But this rapid increase in power came with a downside: he had little to no actual combat experience. Aside from his encounter with the Iron Arm pirates, Wood hadn't truly faced a life-or-death situation. Gaining power too quickly without the corresponding battle experience and mental fortitude was not a good thing. It was like trying to store water in a plastic bag. The bag might hold just as much water as a metal bucket, but it's far less sturdy. The slightest pressure could cause the bag to burst, spilling all the water. Wood's rapidly increasing power was like the water in the plastic bag, and he needed to transfer it into a secure metal bucket. When Wood first requested to spar with the prisoners, Saldeath, despite his humorous personality, initially refused. However, Sadie quickly agreed, and every time Wood fought, she made sure to be there in person. It wasn't because she wanted to support him, but rather because she saw Wood as someone who, like her, enjoyed hearing the sounds of others in pain. In her eyes, they were kindred spirits. To Sadie, there was no difference between a level 3 or 4 prisoner getting beaten up by a guard beast or getting beaten up by Wood. Besides, after being beaten so many times, the prisoners in levels 3 and 4 had become so terrified of the guard beasts that they had given up on resisting, which had started to bore Sadie. By comparison, Wood was still a new face to the prisoners. How strong could a rookie who didn't even qualify for a Navy cloak be? Having to do hard labor every day, and occasionally getting beaten up by the massive guard beasts, the prisoners at Impel Down needed an outlet for their pent-up rage and frustration. And since there were no women around, fighting was the only way to let off steam. Given that Wood had defeated Minotaurus, handling the prisoners in levels 3 and 4 wasn't much of a challenge for him. But there were a lot of them, and Wood always fought while wearing heavy weights, which made things more difficult. Level 4 prisoners usually had bounties close to 1 billion Baileys. In a one-on-one fight, they were no match for Wood, but their numbers allowed them to overwhelm him with sheer volume and wear him down through attrition. Compared to the wild boars behind the Navy Academy, the prisoners in level 4 were much more difficult to deal with. Even with shackles on their feet, they were ruthless, cunning, and skilled in dirty tactics. In fact, during his first few attempts to use them as sparring partners, Wood was beaten nearly to death every time. Sadie had expected to hear the prisoners' groans, but instead, she ended up listening to Wood's pained cries. However, despite the beatings, Wood gained a wealth of combat experience. His opponents included martial artists, sword masters, and karate experts. In just 6 months, Wood felt that his progress had far surpassed what he had achieved at the Navy Academy. Chapter 40, Marine Headquarters Captain, Giant Marine Headquarters, Maniford. Knock, knock, knock. A series of knocks echoed from the office door of the Fleet Admiral. Sitting at his desk, Sengoku handed a document to the goat beside him and then gestured for the person at the door to enter. Sorry to disturb you, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. This is my mission report. On my way back, I happened to encounter a pirate crew, so I took the opportunity to eliminate them as well. Because of this detour to pursue the pirate crew, the return trip took 1 extra day. It was entirely my decision to deviate from the mission and hunt down the pirates, so if there is any punishment to be given, I request that it be directed at me alone and not my crew. The person who entered the office was a valiant female Marine officer. She had striking black hair, a long sword at her waist, and an impressive figure, highlighted by a pair of long legs that were hard for most men to ignore. If Wood were here, he would undoubtedly recognize her as Diane, who he hadn't seen in half a year. Now, Giant was dressed in the pristine white uniform of a Marine officer, with a cloak emblazoned with the word Justice draped over her shoulders. When Giant graduated, she held the rank of sergeant, a position that neither warranted a Marine cloak nor permitted direct meetings with the Fleet Admiral. Clearly, in the past 6 months, Giant's career at Marine headquarters had advanced significantly, unlike Wood, who had been relegated to guarding a remote outpost. As Sengoku reviewed Giant's mission report, he nodded approvingly. When he saw that the pirate crew she had taken down was one of the notorious ones with a bounty exceeding 100 million Baileys, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. "You've done well, Captain Jian. I've already received a letter of thanks from the kingdom you assisted. They were very pleased with how you handled the situation. As for the extra day it took to return, given the circumstances, it's understandable. Eliminating a dangerous pirate crew aligns with our mission of upholding justice, so there will be no punishment this time. However, next time, if you encounter a similar situation, it's best to report to Marine Headquarters via Den Den Mushi. We don't want you to disregard Marine regulations like some old fools do." Given Sengoku's close relationship with Vice Admiral Tsuru, it was impossible for him not to know Jian. Since Jian's graduation, Sengoku had been quite impressed with her performance. Unlike many Marines, Jian, as a woman, was more meticulous and thoughtful in her actions, traits she had clearly inherited from Tsuru, the Marine strategist. In the recent mission to quell unrest in a kingdom allied with the world government, Jian had handled the situation flawlessly. Not only did she manage the unrest efficiently, boosting the Marines' reputation, but she also ensured that there were no lingering issues after the operation. Quelling unrest isn't particularly difficult. In fact, Marine Headquarters could easily send a high-ranking officer to handle such situations. But only Jian could manage the aftermath so perfectly. As for the old fool Sengoku mentioned, Jian didn't need an explanation to know he was referring to Vice Admiral Garp, the Marine hero. From what she had learned from Tsuru, Garp treated his pirate hunting missions as vacations. Even when dealing with weak pirates, he would take his sweet time before returning to headquarters, making delayed returns a common occurrence. There was even one instance where Garp didn't return to Marine Headquarters for several months, only coming back reluctantly after receiving an urgent order from Sengoku, who had reached the end of his patience. As the Marine hero and a figure of reverence within the organization, Garp's overly casual behavior was a constant source of frustration for Sengoku. He believed that Garp's laid-back attitude was detrimental to the overall discipline within the Marines. Not to mention that Sengoku had noticed some of the promising new recruits under his watch had already started to pick up on Garp's bad habits. One such recruit was Borsalino, now a vice admiral, who possessed the powers of the glint fruit, one of the strongest Logia-type devil fruits. He was also highly skilled in both observation hockey and armament hockey. However, what troubled Sengoku the most about Borsalino was his extreme aversion to trouble. He would do the bare minimum required by his pay, clock in and out of work on time, and lacked a strong sense of justice or loyalty to the Marines. Another recruit Sengoku had high hopes for also seemed to be influenced by Garp's attitude. Sengoku was convinced that Garp bore significant responsibility for the changes in this recruit. That recruit was Kyuzn, who had spent some time under Garp's tutelage after graduation. Unlike Borsalino, Kyuzn had a strong sense of belonging to the Marines and a personal code of justice. But after working with Garp, the once promising young man seemed more interested in taking it easy, even adopting the moniker Lazy Justice. After that, Sengoku decided that no promising Marine recruit would be placed under Garp's mentorship again. Garp's refusal to accept a promotion to Admiral was clearly a ploy to maintain his freedom. While it was once justifiable when he was chasing Roger, now that Roger had been dead for years, Garp's reluctance to take the position was purely for the sake of avoiding responsibility. "You performed excellently on this mission, Captain Jian. It must have been tough handling that royal unrest. I'm giving you a few days off. Take some time to rest." Looking at the confident and capable Jian, Sengoku couldn't help but feel more and more satisfied. If the Marines had more officers like Jian, strong, skilled, and tactful, his job as Fleet Admiral would be much easier. When Kong was Fleet Admiral, both he and Tsuru handled military affairs. Now that Sengoku held the position, it seemed like the burden still fell on him. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, suppressing the unrest was actually quite straightforward, and taking down that pirate crew was just a minor detour. "I don't really need a break. Well, at least I personally don't need one. If there's any mission that requires only a small team, I'd be happy to take it on." Initially, Jian was going to decline the offer for time off, but she quickly realized that she couldn't speak for everyone. Her subordinates had been on the move with her for days, and they could definitely use a break. So she adjusted her statement, clarifying that only she didn't need the rest. Chapter 41, Escorting the Celestial Dragon Slaves. When Jian finished speaking, Sengoku, sitting at his desk, was so moved that he couldn't help but pound the table in excitement. He was genuinely touched. At this moment, he really wanted to call over Garp, Kizaru, and Okiji to show them what a true Marine should be like. As a Fleet Admiral, Sengoku worked tirelessly 365 days a year, waking up early and staying up late to handle various affairs. He even had to clean up the messes left by certain individuals, like a grandfather dealing with mischievous children. But despite all this effort, none of his subordinates made his life any easier. Some even spent their days figuring out how to slack off. Seeing Giant's dedication, Sengoku felt that she was the true model of what a Marine should be. In fact, it wasn't that Giant was exceptionally diligent or eager to work overtime. What made her different was the influence of a man named Wood, someone she had come to know. This wouldn't have been an issue by itself. After all, in one's life, the people you meet and truly connect with are few and far between, and those who actually influence your life path are even rarer. Oddly enough, Wood might have already forgotten about Giant, but she saw Wood as one of those rare individuals who had a significant impact on her life. This isn't to say that Giant had feelings for Wood. Rather, her intense competitiveness had driven her to remember the display of strength Wood had shown her 6 months ago. Giant had already considered Wood a rival, and after their last encounter, while Wood was content to pursue a leisurely and stable life, Giant never forgot her desire to catch up to and surpass him. Admittedly, Giant acknowledged that 6 months ago, she was no match for Wood. But in the time that had passed since, she had experienced a great deal and had grown much stronger. However, knowing Wood's talent and character, Giant was convinced that even if Wood was hiding in some remote corner, his strength wouldn't have stagnated over these 6 months. Determined to catch up to and eventually surpass Wood, Giant refused to pass up any opportunity to grow stronger. That's why she decided to decline Fleet Admiral Sengoku's offer to take a break. Sengoku, unaware of Giant's true motivations, simply admired her high sense of duty. And since he had no reason to refuse a Marine who was eager to improve, he quickly handed Giant another mission file. Escorting slaves to the Holy Land, Mary Ijos? As she read the mission details, Giant couldn't help but frown. Everyone knew that Mary Ijos was the residence of the Celestial Dragons, the world's aristocracy, and the de facto rulers of the world government. In other words, the Celestial Dragons were the Marine headquarters' ultimate superiors. However, anyone who had ever encountered the Celestial Dragons had no fondness for these so-called world nobles. Even the Marines disliked dealing with them. Having known Wood for 2 years, Giant had came to see him as a somewhat shameless individual, but compared to the Celestial Dragons, Wood was merely mischievous. The Celestial Dragons of Mary Ijos were the real scum of the seas. Complete human garbage. Noticing Giant's expression, Sengoku sighed with a look of resignation. He, too, was fully aware of the nature of the Celestial Dragons. However, the Marines took orders from the world government, and the world government served the Celestial Dragons. This left the Marines with no choice but to comply. The Celestial Dragons were the descendants of 19 of the 20 kings who formed the world government 800 years ago. They regarded themselves as descendants of the creators and enjoyed every privilege imaginable. It was said that they were the descendants of those who saved the world, though the truth of this claim was impossible to verify, as that part of history had been completely erased. However, the Celestial Dragons had been entrenched in power for centuries, with their influence deeply rooted across the seas. Every Marine's salary, every cannon, and every warship came from world government funds, leaving the Marines with no ability to defy the Celestial Dragons. Garp, Sengoku, Zephyr. All of them were true Marines who upheld their own sense of justice. But why did they follow the orders of the world government? Because they had no choice. Without money, there could be no war, and individual power alone couldn't suppress the chaos brought by pirates on the seas. The Celestial Dragons were trash, the world government was their lapdog, and even the Marines had their share of corrupt individuals. But it was undeniable that the Marines' presence did, to some extent, curb the spread of evil on the seas. Garp and Sengoku saw hope in the future of the Marines, so they chose to endure. As for Luffy's father, Dragon, he saw the world government as beyond redemption. Rather than waiting for some uncertain future change, he decided to take matters into his own hands, seeking to change the present and forge a new future. We can't say that Garp, Zephyr, and others like them are wrong. It's simply a matter of different choices. If we had to categorize them, Garp and his peers would be conservatives, while Dragon and the Revolutionary Army would be considered radicals. One thing was certain, though. Both the conservatives and the radicals despised the Celestial Dragons. This was why Giant frowned when she read the mission file. She, too, hated the Celestial Dragons, and the mission involved escorting slaves. A practice she found deeply repugnant. I know this mission might be difficult for you, but I trust you more than anyone else for this task. Sengoku said. Originally, Sengoku had planned to assign the mission to Vice Admiral Kadaur. Though Kadaur wasn't particularly sharp, he was clever enough and knew how to flatter. He probably wouldn't clash with the Celestial Dragons. However, Sengoku ultimately decided to give the task to Giant because she had handled the recent kingdom's internal strife so well. She was capable and tactful, unlike Garp and others who were prone to impulsive actions. Moreover, this mission aligned perfectly with Giant's request. The number of slaves to be escorted wasn't large, so the mission required only a few capable Marine officers. To ensure Giant had the necessary authority for this mission, Sengoku generously offered to let her assemble a small elite team, consisting of any Marine personnel below the rank of Vice Admiral. So I can choose any Marine officer below the rank of Vice Admiral to be my subordinate? Giant's hand, which had been about to put down the mission file, paused upon hearing Sengoku's words. Of course. After all, I'm the Fleet Admiral. Putting together an elite team to assist you with this mission is well within my power. Just remember, the personnel you select must be from within the Marines. If you need someone from a special unit, it might take some time. Chapter 42, Wood reassigned back to headquarters at the Marine headquarters, Manaford Harbor. This was Wood's second time returning to Marine headquarters since he first came here from Maple Island. Over the past 6 months, the headquarters hadn't changed much. If there was any difference, it was that the number of Marines at the port had significantly increased. Wood had been living quite comfortably in Impel Down, having built good relationships with several members of the management. He had carved out a decent place for himself there. However, just yesterday, while he was working with Little Sadi to discipline some prisoners on the 4th level, he suddenly received a call from his squad leader, instructing him to return to Marine headquarters. When he first heard the order, Wood was clearly confused. But he quickly came to his senses, his face lighting up with excitement as he looked at the squad leader, who held the rank of Marine captain. Previously, the squad leader had mentioned that he would commend Wood's exceptional contributions to the higher-ups. Wood had thought it was just talk, but now it seemed that the squad leader had actually followed through. Although staying at Impel Down allowed him to continuously train against prisoners, Wood had always felt that staying there was too dangerous, especially if something like the escape of the Golden Lion happened again. So, he had been looking for a way out. When he heard that he was being summoned back to Marine headquarters by order of Fleet Admiral Sengoku, he was sure that this meant a promotion. Today, as a warship arrived at Impel Down to escort prisoners, Wood took the opportunity to leave with it. As they watched the departing warship, some members of the Marine squad stationed at Impel Down were less than pleased. Captain, did you really commend that guy Wood to the higher-ups? Why? He hasn't even been here that long. I've been here for 2 years. If there's a chance for promotion and leaving this place, shouldn't we be considered first? The dissatisfaction wasn't just from one person, several others shared the sentiment. While working at Impel Down was relatively easy, it was also extremely dull and boring. Impel Down was surrounded by the Com Belt, filled with Sea Kings, with no other entertainment options on the island. The place was either filled with prisoners or monstrous jailer beasts. For the Marines stationed there, it felt like a prison as well. The only difference between them and the prisoners was that they didn't have to endure punishments or be confined to a cell every day. Not everyone could be like Wood, who managed to coexist peacefully with the non-human jailer beasts and found daily amusement by sparring with the prisoners. While Wood found his life at Impel Down fulfilling, for others, the routine was mind-numbingly boring. Shut up. If it weren't for the higher-ups mentioning Wood's name, I would have forgotten we even had someone like him here. If simply commending someone to the higher-ups could get me out of this hellhole, I would have done it myself ages ago. You think I want to stay in this godforsaken place? Hearing the squad leader words, the other Marines stationed at Impel Down were taken aback. Now, the question was, if it wasn't because of the squad leader's commendation, why had Wood suddenly received orders to return to Marine headquarters? If they remembered correctly, Wood was just a third-class seaman, basically a low-ranking grunt. How could the Fleet Admiral even remember his name, let alone specifically call him back to headquarters? Maybe he's some hidden big shot, or perhaps he has connections at Marine headquarters. Damn, if I had known Wood had such a complicated background, I would have gotten closer to him. Maybe I'd be getting promoted and leaving this place with him. The Marines at Impel Down all assumed that Wood was being promoted and leaving, and even Wood himself thought the same. However, when Wood noticed that the Marine escorting him wasn't leading him towards the Fleet Admiral's office but instead towards the living quarters of senior officers, he began to find the situation odd. Hey, wasn't I summoned back to headquarters by Fleet Admiral Sengoku? So why are we heading to the residential area instead of the office? Manaford was a large island, with a market and towns to support the daily needs of the stationed Marines. Besides the towering central headquarters and its imposing walls, the island also had several residential areas. These were where the senior officers of Marine headquarters and their families lived. The Marine escorting Wood held a similar rank to him, yet instead of leading him to the towering headquarters building, he was taking him to the residential area, prompting Wood to ask the question. The Fleet Admiral summoned you back to headquarters at the request of our captain. So, we're going to see our captain, not Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Captain? Wood was puzzled by the escort's explanation. Although he had been a Marine for 2 or 3 years, spending 2 of those years at Marine headquarters, he knew very few senior officers. Excluding Vice Admiral Garp and Admiral Zephyr, the only Marine captain he knew was the one who had taught them basic training. Was it really this captain who had asked the fleet admiral to summon him back to headquarters? Setting aside the question of whether a marine captain could pull such strings with the fleet admiral, Wood distinctly remembered that this captain hadn't held him in particularly high regard back then. Full of questions, Wood was eventually led to a modest-looking house. The marine escort announced his arrival to someone inside, saluted, and left. As Wood hesitated, wondering whether he should report in before entering to see who was inside, a tall figure slowly emerged from the house. Since it wasn't an active duty time, the person wasn't dressed in a marine uniform but in a loose knit sweater. Despite the loose clothing, it was impossible to conceal her impressive figure, and her long, ivory-like legs were fully exposed to the air. "It's you. It's only been half a year, and you've already become a marine captain at headquarters." Half a year isn't a long time, but it's not short either, yet it was clearly not enough to drastically change someone's appearance. So as soon as the person appeared, Wood immediately recognized her as Jian, whom he hadn't seen in half a year. He had been puzzled about why Marine headquarters suddenly remembered someone as insignificant as him after 6 months of idling at Impel Down. It turned out that it was all Jian's doing. Chapter 43, The Struggle Between Wood and Jian. I never expected that our young sword master, the genius once praised by instructors Effer and Vice Admiral Garp, would still be a third-class seaman after half a year. Jian had never cared much about her rank. What mattered to her was her own strength. As for the title of rank, she believed that as long as her strength grew, everything else would naturally follow. However, Jian herself didn't know why, but when she saw Wood, whom she hadn't seen in half a year, still at the same rank and with that envious look in his eyes, she uncharacteristically took on the attitude of a colonel and teased him. Since getting to know Wood, Jian had always felt like she was at a disadvantage. Her most proud accomplishment was her swordsmanship, but the other party was a younger sword master. She once thought she had surpassed him in strength and even took pride in it for a while, advising him as a superior. But she was soon humiliated again. Half a year had passed, and though Jian didn't know how strong Wood had become, seeing the jealousy in his eyes towards her rank made her feel great. She felt that she had finally gained the upper hand after being outdone for so long. TSK, dirty politics. It's different when you have someone backing you in the Marine headquarters. It's only been half a year since graduation, and you've jumped several ranks from sergeant to Marine colonel. She couldn't deny that seeing Jian as a Marine colonel made Wood genuinely envious. His goal was to become a colonel at the Red Leaf Island Marine branch. Although a branch's colonel didn't hold as much weight as a headquarters colonel, to be transferred from the headquarters to a branch as a colonel required at least the level of a headquarters major. Wood's current rank was third-class seaman, and he was still 9 ranks away from headquarters major. Second-class seaman, first-class seaman, sergeant, staff sergeant, petty officer, warrant officer, ensign, lieutenant, and captain. He was 11 ranks away from Jian's current position as Marine colonel. They had graduated from the same school and were in the same class, yet the gap between them was staggering. "What are you talking about? I became a Marine colonel at the headquarters purely through my own abilities, not by pulling strings. I thought you would maintain your low-profile principles, but I never imagined you'd stay this low-key. Do you know how much effort it took me to find you in the Marine roster?" The internal structure of the Marines was extensive, with various divisions apart from the Special Scientific Research Unit. Jian didn't know where Wood had been assigned, so she could only search by rank. Although the Marines had a large number of personnel, over 90% were ordinary soldiers. At first, Jian searched through the Marines for names under the Marine colonel rank like hers. After scanning through hundreds of Marine colonels, she couldn't find Wood's name. Then, recalling Wood's unusually low-key nature, Jian began searching among Marine commanders and majors. But again, she found nothing. Unwilling to give up, Jian continued her search, confident that Wood's name would be in the Marine roster unless he had died. Usually, this roster wasn't available for casual browsing, but Fleet Admiral Sengoku had previously granted her permission to select any Marine officer below the rank of captain, allowing her such privileges. Having exhausted the list of Marine officers from captain to lieutenant, a red-eyed Jian still hadn't found Wood's name. Given Wood's strength and cautious nature, Jian couldn't believe he would die so easily. She began to suspect that Wood might have been promoted to a higher rank, but after consulting with Vice Admiral Tsuru, she learned that officers of such high rank in the Marine headquarters were few and far between. If someone their age had become a captain or higher, it would have been a rare talent like Okiji or Kizaru, and she would have known. Undeterred, Jian spent an entire night searching, finally finding Wood's name among the countless third-class seamen. Jian was almost relieved that Wood had at least secured a third-class seaman rank at graduation. Otherwise, finding him among the ordinary Marines would have been like searching for a needle in a haystack. After all, in these pre-modern times, without computers, all records and information processing relied on manual documentation. With so many ordinary Marines, even those named Wood were likely more than a few. Giant truly couldn't understand why, given Wood's strength, he hadn't even made it to a sergeant level after half a year. Even if he was underperforming, he should at least have become a petty officer. After all, they were elite Marines who had undergone specialized training. The worst of Zephyr's students had become sergeants. But Wood was still a third-class seaman after all this time. That was being low-key to the extreme. Unfortunately, Giant didn't know that Wood didn't want to be this low profile. He had even wanted to advance quickly so he could leave Marine headquarters and get a quiet post at a branch as a colonel. But the real problem was that his assignment had been in a terrible location. Spending half a year at Impel Down, not only had the Marine headquarters forgotten about him, but even the members of his squad had nearly forgotten his existence. Unable to go to sea and chase pirates, and even marginalized from desk jobs, how was he supposed to get promoted? I know you've always been low-key, but I really need a few capable people to help with this mission. If the mission is successful, you could be promoted directly to the rank of sergeant, petty officer. Considering your preference for staying out of the limelight, I can help you exchange the promotion for other rewards. When Wood saw Giant, he immediately suspected trouble was coming, and sure enough, the next second she revealed why she had called him back to Marine headquarters. Initially, Wood had no interest in the mission Giant mentioned and was about to refuse. But when he heard that completing the mission could lead to a promotion to sergeant, he stopped in his tracks. Chapter 44, Are 2 people really enough to carry out the mission? Wood had calculated that with his current rank, if he continued working in Impel Down according to standard procedures, it would take at least 20 years to be promoted to the rank of major in the Navy headquarters. And that was an optimistic estimate. If any problems arose in Impel Down, or if they made any mistakes, this time frame could be even longer. Opportunities to return to the Navy headquarters were rare, and opportunities for rapid promotion were even rarer. Promotion or not isn't the most important thing, the point is, I'm someone who values loyalty above all. We've known each other for 2 years now. Our relationship may not be that close, but as former classmates, if Giant needs help, I, Wood, will naturally offer my full support. Wood's words were spoken with such enthusiasm that if Giant didn't already know what kind of person Wood was, she might have believed him. Navy headquarters, Fleet Admiral's office. Giant, are you sure that only the 2 of you are needed for this mission? There are plenty of idle captains at the Navy headquarters. As long as I officially appoint you as the squad leader, even if their ranks are the same, they would still follow your commands. The old man with the goatee asked Giant again, confirming whether sending just the 2 of them for the mission was too rash. After Giant had accepted the mission, she had made no moves for 2 whole days. Sengoku had assumed that Giant was taking the mission very seriously and was being extremely careful in selecting personnel. However, after 2 days, Giant had chosen a private who wasn't even at the level of a non-commissioned officer out of the tens of thousands of outstanding Navy officers. Yes, Fleet Admiral. This is a decision I made after careful consideration. This mission doesn't require many personnel. If we bring too many people, it might attract the attention of those with ulterior motives and risk alerting the enemy. Don't be fooled by Wood's seemingly unreliable nature. As his former classmate, I can vouch for his strength. There will be absolutely no problems. And to maintain the Navy's reputation, I ask that Fleet Admiral Sengoku allow us to conceal our Navy identities during this mission. The Celestial Dragons don't care who is responsible for transporting them, as long as the slaves are successfully delivered to Mary Joyce. Concealing our Navy identities benefits us in 2 ways. It facilitates our actions and keeps us from tarnishing the Navy's reputation by participating in the transport of slaves. A task that is far from just. Before Giant could finish speaking, Sengoku nodded in understanding and looked at her with admiration. If someone else had been assigned to interact with the Celestial Dragons, Sengoku would have worried about potential conflicts between them and the Celestial Dragons. But Giant had even considered the potential negative impact on the Navy, displaying such meticulous thought and smooth handling that Sengoku had no reason to believe she would act rashly. After a moment of hesitation, he ultimately approved all of Giant's requests, including their actions and the concealment of their identities. After leaving the Fleet Admiral's office, Wood gave Giant a disdainful look. A dirty deal right before my eyes. You're helping the Celestial Dragons with human trafficking, yet you're afraid of tainting the cloak of justice, so you plan to act discreetly by hiding your identity? I never realized that the seemingly pure Giant is quite skilled at playing politics and intrigue. Giant had discussed the mission of transporting with Wood earlier but hadn't mentioned that they would be transporting the Celestial Dragon slaves. If Wood had known the true nature of the mission, he would rather spend his life stuck in Impel Down than agree to assist Giant. In the entire One Piece series, the existence that disgusted and repulsed Wood the most was the so-called world nobles, the Celestial Dragons. Some pirates committed heinous crimes, pillaging and killing wherever they went, but their evil deeds paled in comparison to those of the world nobles. The celestial dragons were, without a doubt, the root of evil in this world. Wood didn't consider himself a particularly kind person, but he had his limits. He couldn't bring himself to risk his life to eliminate the celestial dragons for the people, but he certainly couldn't bring himself to help them carry out their vile deeds. You think I like those swine-like beings? Even if we don't do this mission, Fleet Admiral Sengoku would still send others to carry it out. The Navy is still part of the world government, and not even Fleet Admiral Sengoku can refuse this mandatory task. And compared to someone else taking on this mission, why shouldn't it be us? Maybe we can do a better job. Hearing Wood's sarcastic remarks, Jian didn't get angry. Instead, she responded with a subtle expression. Since this was an important mission, the more combat power, the better. So why did Jian, after rejecting numerous capable captains, insist on taking only herself and Wood? Was the request to conceal their Navy identities merely for the sake of the Navy's reputation? Wood wasn't an idiot. After hearing Jian's suggestive words, he finally showed a relieved expression. He didn't know Jian's exact plan, but as a private, he couldn't defy the orders of the Fleet Admiral and the Navy captains. Since he was already on this pirate ship, he could only see it through to the end. After Jian and Wood left the room, Sengoku took out another file to continue working. However, he soon showed a troubled expression. Let's hope that girl Jian doesn't go overboard. Sengoku, known as the strategist, was no fool. He could see through things more clearly than anyone else. He could even guess what Jian was planning after she made those strange requests. There was no doubt that Jian had a Navy justice in her heart, and like Tsuru, she was cautious and thorough in her actions. Sengoku now worried that Jian might go too far, forcing him to clean up their mess later. Sengoku then looked at another file on his desk, which contained Wood's detailed personal information. She didn't choose to act alone but instead picked a private. It seems that girl Jian has a lot of trust in this kid named Wood. Chapter 45, Jian, do you even have integrity and credibility? The Grand Line, Red Line's first half-sun point, Sabati Archipelago. After Wood docked the boat, he and Jian landed in Area 7 of Sabati Archipelago. Because this mission only involved Jian and Wood, they didn't take a Navy battleship from the headquarters. Instead, they bought a small sailboat. A small sailboat like this has limited capacity for supplies, so it's not suitable for long ocean voyages. However, since Sabati Archipelago isn't far from Navy headquarters, the two of them could complete this short trip without much trouble unless they encountered a seeking attack. As for how a certain great swordsman managed to chase someone from the New World to the East Blue on a single raft, Wood was curious about that too. Do great swordsmen not need food, water, or other necessities along the way? It's worth noting that Mahawk's boat, calling it a boat is generous, was essentially just a flimsy raft with a seat attached. After throwing the boat's anchor into the sea, Wood turned to the long-legged girl in casual clothes and shorts beside him and said, "As far as I know, areas 1 to 29 of Sabati Archipelago are all lawless zones. It's not uncommon for people to be suddenly kidnapped while walking on the street. Are you sure it's safe to leave the boat here? This isn't a Navy vessel, but your private property, right? Sabati Archipelago is essentially the largest mangrove tree in the world, the Yarukiman mangrove. Since its roots are exposed above the water's surface, they form the archipelago. Though it's called an archipelago, the islands are actually just tree roots, so log poses don't register this location. They only record the Fishman Island 10,000 meters below. The area where Wood and Jian landed is part of the lawless zone. If it were a Navy battleship, no one would dare steal it since Navy headquarters isn't far. But the small pink sailboat they arrived on, with its rabbit-ear decorations on the roof, clearly wasn't a Navy vessel. It's fine. There's nothing valuable on the boat, so if it gets stolen, it gets stolen. The mission is more important right now, and circling around to the other side of the island would waste a lot of time. Area 1 of the island houses the largest slave auction. Our mission target should be there," Jian explained. Hearing Jian's words, Wood couldn't help but be surprised. Having grown up on Maple Leaf Island, he knew a thing or two about the value of wood. The materials used for Jian's boat were even better than high-quality mahogany, and even without considering the craftsmanship, it must have cost at least tens of millions of baileys. Yet Jian was willing to let it be stolen so easily. Are Navy captains' salaries that high? Why do I only get a few 100,000 baileys a month? Jian, if I may ask, how much is a Navy captain's monthly salary? As the two moved quickly towards Area 1, Jian, though puzzled by Wood's sudden question, satisfied his curiosity. A Navy captain's monthly salary isn't that much, about 10 million baileys. Jian didn't have much concept of money. Unlike other women, Jian didn't have many interests. She was either on standby at Navy headquarters or out on missions, so she rarely spent money. 10 million baileys. Wait, 10 million is a lot, but that boat must have cost several months' salary. Aren't you worried about losing it? What are you talking about? While a Navy captain's salary is around 10 million baileys, when we capture or kill pirates with bounties, we get a cut of the bounty, even if it's not the full amount like bounty hunters get. Though this practice isn't explicitly written in the Navy's benefits regulations, there has always been an unwritten rule about it. The Navy headquarters' ability to place billion-berry bounties on pirates proves its financial strength. For promising Navy officers, giving them a portion of the bounty is both more economical than paying full bounties like bounty hunters and motivates them to capture pirates. Wood didn't know about this rule because he had been stationed at Impel Down for the past 6 months. He hadn't been involved in any pirate hunting operations, the only pirates he saw were those coming to serve prison time. Giant had quickly risen through the ranks in half a year, no doubt due to the many pirate crews she had defeated. So, in a sense, the Giant in front of Wood was a real rich woman. Giant, you must be pretty well off now. Can I borrow 30 million? No, 50 million baileys? Don't worry, I swear on my honor that I'll pay you back. We've known each other for so long, you should know my reputation by now. Sabati Archipelago, being the end point of the first half of the Grand Line and the starting point of the New World, is where pirates from the 4 seas gather before entering the New World. So, it's also a massive trade hub. While the slave trade is dominant, it's not the only thing available. Rare information, famous swords, even devil fruits. If you're lucky, you might find them here. Wood wanted to borrow money from Giant to try his luck and see if he could pick up something valuable. According to what I've heard from Tashigi, you've never paid back the money you owe Smoker. As for your integrity and reputation, do you really have those? And what do you need so much money for? Are you planning to buy some female slaves like those scumbags? Don't forget, we're on a mission, there's no time for shopping. The slaves that the Celestial Dragons bought at the auction had been sitting there for several days. The slave traders were too afraid to deliver them due to the value of the merchandise. So the Celestial Dragons turned to the Navy. The Celestial Dragons in Mary Ejos had been waiting impatiently for this new batch of slaves, and if Giant had delayed much longer, Sengoku would have assigned the task to another Navy officer. Chapter 46, Wood and Giant mistaken for easy prey. Wood, is this guy a wanted pirate? On Island 4 of Sabati Archipelago, in a sparsely populated area, a tall, fair-skinned, long-legged girl was casually carrying a burly man much larger than herself. She looked at the black-haired boy beside her and asked. The black-haired boy was squatting on the ground, holding a stack of wanted posters, comparing the faces of several unconscious individuals lying on the ground. If one looked closely, they would notice that many people were lying unconscious around this young man and woman, and most of these individuals were prominent figures on Sabati Archipelago. Sabati Archipelago is composed of 79 large trees. The areas from 1 to 29 mainly include places like human trafficking shops, slave auctions, and lawless zones. Areas 30 to 39 have places like Soap Bubble Park. Areas 40 to 49 are tourist areas with specialty shops. Areas 50 to 59 include shipyards and coating craftsmen. Areas 60 to 69 have Navy bases and government entrances. Areas 70 to 79 primarily consist of hotels. Wood and Giant had landed in the Red Tree Area 7 and were heading towards Red Tree Area 1, which meant they were passing through the lawless zones of Sabati Archipelago. Giant was tall and, despite wearing casual clothes, her beautiful face, impressive curves, and long legs exposed by her shorts quickly drew the attention of some slave traders. Although both Wood and Giant had long swords hanging at their waists, their young age made them look like easy prey in this lawless area. The two of them were exceptionally good-looking, and their youth made them valuable in any slave market. As for the long swords at their waists, the slavers simply ignored them. After all, in these chaotic times, even kids carried knives for protection. These slavers, who lived by the sword, weren't about to be scared off by two young people carrying swords. There were many slave traders on Sabati Archipelago, and such high-quality merchandise needed to be secured quickly before someone else took advantage of it. The slavers assumed that Wood and Giant were too young to be powerful, so they made their move. However, just a few minutes later, they were all knocked out cold. Aside from the guy in your hand, who's worth 33 million baileys, the rest are worthless. Wood said dejectedly after comparing the wanted posters in his hand. They had been surrounded by more than 50 people, yet only the one in Giant's hand had a bounty. Don't ask where Wood got the wanted posters. Ever since Giant mentioned that the Navy gets a cut from capturing wanted pirates, he quickly found the most comprehensive and up-to-date pirate bounty list on the island. Most of the people involved in human trafficking on Sabati Archipelago are part of underground organizations or bounty hunters. Some pirates might also get involved in these activities while waiting for their ships to be coated. I just didn't expect such trash to be worth 33 million Baileys. The Navy's method of setting bounties seems a bit too random. The pirate worth 33 million Baileys was quite a figure in his own territory, yet Giant casually tossed him aside like a piece of garbage, her expression full of disdain. As Giant said this, the other slavers and pirates hiding around them, who hadn't had a chance to act yet, gulped audibly. As mentioned before, there were many slavers on Sabati Archipelago, and competition was fierce. So, the number of people who had their eyes on Wood and Giant wasn't limited to the 50 or so who had already attacked. Many others hadn't had the chance to act yet. These latecomers had originally planned to target Wood and Giant, but after witnessing the fight, their excitement quickly turned to caution. Sabati Archipelago is the gateway to the New World, and the pirates here are mostly rookies who haven't entered the New World yet. Having a bounty over 100 million Baileys here is enough to earn the title of Supernova. A new pirate with a bounty over 100 million Baileys before entering the New World is already considered a big shot. A bounty of 33 million Baileys on Sabati Archipelago is top tier and makes one a notable figure. Yet this powerful pirate, along with his 50-plus subordinates, had attacked these two young people and been defeated in less than 3 minutes. Surprisingly, it wasn't the young man and woman who were defeated in those 3 minutes, but the 50-plus members of this pirate group moonlighting as slavers. The pirate captain with the 33 million Bailey bounty was taken down by the long-legged beauty in less than 2 moves, just like an ordinary low-level thug. Having witnessed this, the other slavers lurking around quickly realized that these two young people weren't easy prey. They were fierce predators. There seemed to be more of these guys hiding around. Should we take them out too? Maybe some of them are worth something. Wood suggested, recalling Giant's mention that the Navy gets a 10% cut of the bounty for capturing pirates. The guy Giant just took out was worth 33 million Baileys, so 10% would be 3.3 million Baileys. Splitting it with Giant would give Wood 1.65 million Baileys. Having just tasted the sweet reward, Wood was tempted by how quickly he could earn money this way. In just a few minutes, he had made several months' worth of salary, so he immediately set his sights on the others hiding in the shadows. Let's not waste time on unnecessary things. Don't forget, we have other matters to attend to. We've already wasted enough time on these scum. Giant said, tugging Wood by the collar and dragging him away just as he was about to go after the hidden slavers. Wood, wait a minute. Even if we don't go after the others, we should at least hand over the guy worth 33 million Baileys to the Navy to claim the reward. Giant, we don't have time for such a hassle right now. Besides, even if we leave him, someone will deliver him to the Navy branch on the island. Wood, nonsense. There's 33 million Baileys lying on the ground, and only an idiot wouldn't pick it up. But that money won't have anything to do with us. Let go of me, you rich woman. You have no idea what it's like to live as a poor man. Chapter 47, the slaves being transported turn out to be mermaids as Wood was being dragged away by Giant. The other slave traders hiding nearby breathed a sigh of relief. Just moments ago, when they heard Wood planning to come after them, his sharp gaze had made them hold their breath in fear. Although they didn't know exactly who Wood and Giant were, it was clear that they were formidable individuals. When Wood's eyes locked onto them earlier, they didn't even dare to turn and run. Years of experience in surviving harsh situations told them that running at that moment would only get them killed faster. Who are those two kids? Why haven't we heard any rumors about such powerful figures arriving on Sabati Archipelago? Who knows where those monsters came from, but they can't be pirates. If they were, with that kind of power, they'd at least be labeled as supernovas. There's no way they could have landed on Sabati without causing a stir. Besides, they don't look like Navy officers either. From the way the guy acted, he seems more like a bounty hunter. As Wood and Giant disappeared into the distance, the other slave traders started discussing among themselves. As the local powers on the island, they had access to certain information channels. However, they were certain that these two young people were newcomers to the island and weren't any famous wanted pirates. Who cares who they are? What matters is that they're people we can't afford to mess with. You guys should note down their appearance and make sure everyone on the island knows not to provoke those two troublemakers. The leader of the slave traders scolded his subordinates for their foolishness. The fact that Wood and Giant had taken down a pirate worth 33 million Baileys without even drawing their swords showed that these two were way out of their league. What about the guy worth 33 million Baileys on the ground? Should we just leave him there? One of the henchmen asked, looking at the unconscious pirates strewn around. You idiot. There's money lying on the ground, and you don't even think to pick it up? Didn't you hear what those big shots said? They clearly don't care about a measly 33 million Baileys. They're after bigger prey. I'll have the men tie these guys up and take them to the Navy branch on the island to claim the bounty. The henchman suggested, thinking his initiative would be praised. But instead, his boss kicked him and berated him harshly. Are you stupid? We're in the slave trade. We're not exactly the Navy's best friends, and dealing with them means accepting whatever lowball bounty they offer. Do you even know what maximizing profit means? Sure, handing over these pirates to the Navy might get us 33 million baileys, but that's nothing compared to what we could make selling them as slaves. If we sell the pirate captain worth 33 million baileys at the slave auction, he could easily fetch 50 million baileys. Even the ordinary pirates who wouldn't bring much from the Navy can sell for tens of thousands of baileys each as slaves. Boss, you're a genius. The henchman exclaimed. Of course. That's why I'm the boss and you're the grunt. Only those who can think smart can be in charge. Quickly, the 50-plus people who had tried to ambush Giant and Wood were tied up by the slave traders. Ironically, these pirates had came to capture slaves, but in the end, they themselves were the ones being turned into slaves. As pirates being handed over to the Navy, their fate might still have been somewhat bearable. If their crimes weren't too severe, they might have had a chance to see the light of day again after 10 or so years in Impel Down. But as slaves, their lives were as good as over. In this world, the treatment of slaves is far worse than that of prisoners. Prisoners at least have some human rights, but most slaves live lives worse than animals. Most slaves bought by the wealthy, especially the celestial dragons, rarely survive more than a year. Even those who do survive often go mad from the torture and abuse they endure. Of course, the pirates who attacked Wood and Giant deserve no sympathy because this is exactly what they had planned to do to the two of them. If Wood and Giant hadn't been strong enough, they would have been the ones being sold at the slave auction. In the Red Tree area, one of Sabati Archipelago, where Don Quixote da Flamengo has yet to rise to power, there are still many slave auctions and slave markets. After arriving at the largest slave auction, Wood and Giant presented their credentials and were shown the merchandise. There were 10 large iron cages, each containing several people, both men and women, and even children. The men were mostly from special races like fishmen, giants, and Longa-Urn tribe, while the women were mostly beautiful and curvaceous humans. Sirs, these are just some cheap goods. Even if a few die during transport, the celestial dragons won't notice. But this particular item is something you need to be careful with. It's very valuable, and the celestial dragons are highly concerned about it. That's why we didn't dare to transport it ourselves. The auction manager explained to Wood and Giant. The manager didn't know exactly who Wood and Giant were, but that didn't stop him from fawning over them as he introduced the goods. Although Wood and Giant hadn't revealed their Navy identities, they had shown the necessary documentation, and the auction manager knew better than to offend anyone connected to the celestial dragons. The two were led to a large spherical tank, and when the manager pulled back the covering curtain, Wood and Giant finally understood why the auction house was so worried about the slaves. Inside the spherical tank was a mermaid. A young female mermaid. It's well known that both fishmen and mermaids are half human, half fish species. Unlike the rough and unattractive fishmen, mermaids are the most sought-after slaves at any auction. Unlike fishmen, who possess some combat ability, most mermaids have little to no fighting skills, which is why they rarely leave their home at Fishman Island, located 10,000 meters below the surface. Even if ships could be coded to reach Fishman Island, capturing one of the world's fastest swimmers, the mermaids, is no easy task. And let's not forget, this isn't like the time when Kami was captured. Whitebeard is still alive, and Fishman Island is under the protection of the Whitebeard pirates. Chapter 48, The Three Gorgon Sisters of Amazon Lily. At this time, Whitebeard was still in his prime, and he was considered the strongest man in the world after Roger's death. Capturing a mermaid was already a difficult task, but with the added deterrence of the Whitebeard pirates, young female mermaids became exceedingly rare. This particular mermaid was sold to the celestial dragons for a whopping 1 billion baileys. With such an outrageous price, it made sense that the auction house would be too afraid to transport her themselves. If something happened to the mermaid during transport, not only would they suffer huge financial loss, but they would also fear the celestial dragons coming after them for retribution. As Wood and Giant left the auction house owner let out a huge sigh of relief. Ever since the auction ended, he had been living in constant fear. The celestial dragons had already paid, but they hadn't yet received their goods. Since Sabiti Archipelago is directly above Fishman Island, he was also worried that something might happen to the mermaid. He even spent a fortune hiring strong guards to watch over the celestial dragon's purchase. Sirs, the ship is ready for you, fully stocked with all the necessary supplies. The ship itself isn't anything valuable, so consider it a gift from us. The auction house owner was willing to go to great lengths to ensure the slaves left Sabiti Archipelago as quickly as possible, so he wouldn't be held responsible if anything went wrong. He even gave away a medium-sized, two-masted sailboat as if it were nothing. Thank you for the ship. Please have these slaves loaded onto it for us, as we are only 2 people. Also, Make sure the slaves have enough food and other supplies. We wouldn't want them dying before we reach Mary Joyce, would we? Only the two of you are responsible for transporting them. The auction house owner was surprised by Wood's statement. He had assumed that Wood and Jian were just in charge, not that they were the only ones handling the transport. Yes, it's just the two of us. Is there a problem with that? No, no problem at all. If the celestial dragons entrusted this task to you two, then it means you must be more than capable. I was just wondering if you needed any sailors or crew members. If so, I'd be happy to provide them. Seeing Jian's cold and emotionless gaze, the auction house owner was frightened. He thought to himself that the celestial dragon's subordinates were indeed unpredictable and dangerous. No need, the two of us are sufficient. Just make sure there's enough food. Remember, the slaves' food should be of the highest quality. We don't want them starving to death before reaching Mary Joyce. After a busy morning at the auction house, the ship was loaded with food and slaves, ready to depart. Not wanting to waste any time, Jian and Wood decided to set sail for the Holy Land of Mary Joyce without lingering in Sabati Archipelago. Humphrey, acting all high and mighty just because they're working for the celestial dragons. The auction house owner, who had been all smiles, spat on the ground as soon as the ship was far enough away. Working for the celestial dragons often meant being part of a special intelligence organization under the world government. The auction house owner had hoped to curry favor with Wood and Jian, perhaps gaining a powerful ally for his business. But despite his efforts, offering them a ship and supplies, he was met with cold indifference, especially from the woman, whose gaze was cold enough to kill. Boss, do you think something might go wrong with just those two transporting the slaves? There have been plenty of fishmen causing trouble at our auction house. They might not be strong on land, but at sea. What do we care? The slaves have left Sabati Archipelago, and they've officially taken over. If anything happens, it's their problem, not ours. The celestial dragons can't blame us. On a medium-sized two-masted sailboat, Jian steered the ship while Wood kept an eye on the surrounding seas and guarded the slaves on deck. The slaves, knowing where they were being taken, were filled with despair. From their expressions, Wood could tell they had completely given up on their futures. The celestial dragon's reputation for cruelty was no secret on Sabati Archipelago. Becoming an ordinary person's slave might leave some hope for survival, but becoming a celestial dragon's slave meant certain death, with no chance of escape or survival. Many of them would have preferred to end their lives rather than suffer, but they were too powerless to do even that. While Jian focused on steering the ship, Wood, feeling bored on deck, tried to engage the slaves in conversation. Unfortunately, most of them either ignored him, having given up on life, or glared at him in anger, seeing him as a lackey of the celestial dragons. Sister, I'm hungry. Don't worry, Mary. Someone will come to rescue us soon. When we return to the island, we'll have plenty of food to eat. But sister, we're hungry now. We haven't eaten anything for days. Inside one of the iron cages, a sweet-looking girl with long black hair, about 11 or 12 years old, was comforting a younger blonde girl. Nearby, a green-haired girl of a similar age sat quietly. Sonia, the green-haired girl, sat obediently beside her older sister, knowing that her sister was only trying to comfort them. Since they had been abducted from the Kuja pirates' ship, a lot of time had passed, but there was no sign of rescue from Amazon Lily. Or perhaps the people of Amazon Lily didn't even know where they had been taken. Or worse, since the world nobles had bought them, even if the Kuja pirates knew they had been captured, they might not be able to save them. Hancock understood all this, and she knew her sister was under even more pressure. The only thing she could do now was not to add to her sister's burden. Oh, I see. You're hungry. No wonder no one was talking. Wait here, I'll get you some food. Chapter 49, The Pirate Empress in her youth on the deck. Besides the captured slaves, only Wood was present. Most of the people remained silent, either because they knew their fate or were too exhausted from hunger to speak. Amidst the silence, Mary's crying and Hancock's comforting voice stood out among the crowd. Hearing the conversation among the young girls, Wood turned around and went into the cabin. He quickly returned with a large amount of food, placing it in front of the girls. Eat, eat. I just checked, and there's plenty of food left on the ship from the auction trash. Even if we feast, it should be more than enough. Seeing the mountain of food piled in front of them, Hancock and the other slaves were stunned. Mary, who had been crying, immediately stopped when she saw the food, slowly reaching out for it. However, before Mary could grab the food, Hancock slapped her hand away. Mary, you can't eat that. It's food from bad people. Who knows what they might have put in it? Having gone without food for days, even Hancock was drooling at the sight of the food. However, reason told her that the auction people, especially those working for the celestial dragons, wouldn't be so kind. Who knew what they might have added to the food? She couldn't let her sisters take that risk. Unfortunately, Mary and Sonia were still children, and their empty stomachs couldn't resist the temptation. They struggled free from Hancock's restraint and slowly crawled toward the food. Just as Hancock was about to assert her authority as the elder sister and knock some sense into Mary and Sonia, the dark-haired man guarding them suddenly reached out his hand towards them. The Boas sisters had been beaten multiple times at the slave auction for disobedience. Now, seeing Wood reaching towards them, Mary and Sonia reflexively closed their eyes and crouched down in fear. Although Hancock was also scared, as the eldest sister, she stood protectively in front of her siblings, her eyes tightly shut, but her arms spread wide to shield them. 1 second, 2 seconds. Time slowly passed, but Hancock didn't feel the expected pain. Curious, she slowly opened her eyes. In front of her was the dark-haired man, smiling as he took a big bite of the food. The hand he extended wasn't to grab them but to reach for the food in front of them. He ate the food in front of them to prove that there was nothing strange or harmful added to it. How about now? Feeling reassured? Although I've never considered myself a good person, I wouldn't stoop to such lowly tactics. Your sisters must be starving by now, and it would be quite a hassle for us if you died of hunger. Wood didn't immediately try to present himself as a good person because he knew that would only make the little girl in front of him more suspicious. I want the half-eaten food in your hand. Despite Wood's words, Hancock remained wary and demanded the half-eaten piece of meat from Wood. All right, cautious little one, as long as you don't mind, Wood said, handing the half-eaten meat to Hancock. Hancock carefully took the meat from Wood and quickly distanced herself from him, as if afraid he might try something. After thoroughly inspecting the partially eaten meat, Hancock handed it to her starving sisters without hesitation. Mary and Sonia, who had been starving for days, didn't care that the meat had already been eaten by someone else. They devoured it hungrily. As Hancock watched her sisters eat, her own hunger grew, but as their elder sister, she would never fight them for food. Hey, little girl, I took a bite of this apple too. You should trust it's safe now, right? As Hancock stared longingly at the meat in her sister's hands, her stomach growling loudly after days without food, an apple with a bite taken out of it suddenly appeared in front of her. Hancock wanted to defiantly throw the apple away, but her physical condition wouldn't allow it. Unlike most people here who had completely given up hope, Hancock hadn't abandoned all hope, even as a slave. Moreover, if she collapsed, what would happen to Mary and Sonia? With that in mind, Hancock reluctantly accepted the apple from Wood and began eating it quickly, suppressing her disgust. The auction staff had been careful not to let the slaves starve to death, but they hadn't fed them enough either. Hancock and her sisters had also been starved for days, so a single apple wasn't nearly enough to fill her up. Before long, Hancock finished half the apple in a few bites. When she saw Wood reaching for more food, she quickly grabbed it first and started eating. She realized that if Wood had intended to harm them, he wouldn't be eating the food himself so confidently. Having confirmed the food was safe, Hancock had no intention of eating leftovers or sharing with Wood, especially after he had already eaten. The Boas sisters ate heartily, and it was clear that nothing was wrong with them. Soon, the other prisoners locked in the iron cages began to stir. They reached through the bars, trying to grab the food Hancock and her sisters were eating. Those who were farther away started begging Wood for food, forgetting how coldly they had treated him earlier. This was the harsh reality. Faced with desperation, not everyone could hold on to their principles. These people had been starving for days, and when they had no hope, they were stubborn and resistant. But once they saw Wood actually providing food, they couldn't resist the temptation. Chapter 50, The Sudden Attack of the Fishmen. Now that you've all eaten your fill, can we talk? Otherwise, it's pretty boring to be alone. I've actually thought for a while that you three look familiar. What's your name, and how did you get captured? Hancock continued to ignore Wood's questions. Although he had indeed provided them with food, it didn't change the fact that he was working for the Celestial Dragons. However, Hancock's silence didn't mean that Mary and Sonia would react the same way. Hancock was more mature, being 12 years old, but Mary and Sonia were still children. To them, Wood was different from the bad people at the auction because he had given them food. Wood's sunny and kind appearance also made him seem less like a bad person, so they unconsciously answered his questions. Big brother, we were kidnapped from the Kuja pirates and taken to the Sabati archipelago. My name is Mary, and my sisters are Sonia and Hancock. Can you let us go? We'll repay you if we can return to Amazon Lily. Mary, he is with those bad guys. Just because he gave you some food doesn't make him a good person. Hancock cut Mary off before she could finish speaking, scolding her sternly. The three sisters had been captured because they trusted others too easily. This had made Hancock extremely distrustful of anyone around them. However, Hancock didn't notice that when Mary mentioned their names, Wood was momentarily stunned. Mary and Sonia's names might not ring any bells, but the name Hancock was a different story for anyone familiar with One Piece. By her Tempress Boa Hancock, renowned as the most beautiful woman in the world, a Paramsha-type love fruit model, love human devil fruit user, and a future member of the 7 warlords of the sea. She had power and beauty, an iconic figure in the world. No wonder Wood had felt they looked familiar. He had encountered a significant character. According to the timeline, Hancock and her sisters were indeed captured and taken to Mary Ejos at this time. They would suffer under the celestial dragons for years until the fishman hero Fisher Tiger climbed the Red Line and freed the slaves. Only then did the 3 sisters manage to escape and return to Amazon Lily. At 12 years old, Hancock wasn't yet the unparalleled beauty she would become, but her face already showed signs of her future stunning looks. As for Mary and Sonia, while they weren't as beautiful as Hancock, they were still attractive. Wood couldn't quite understand why the 2 of them would undergo such drastic transformations 20 years later. While devil fruits could cause physical changes, Mary and Sonia's future appearances seemed to go beyond normal human characteristics. Realizing that the 3 sisters in front of him were the future empresses of Amazon Lily, Wood had initially intended to win some favor from them. However, before he could speak, the brig they were on suddenly began to shake violently. The sea was calm, and the weather was normal. Unless they had struck a reef or encountered some other danger, this kind of shaking shouldn't have happened. With Giant's perfect navigation skills and the sea charts to guide them, they shouldn't have made such a mistake as steering the ship into a reef. This meant that the cause of the ship's violent shaking was likely an external force. Wood, our ship is under attack from below. They're likely after the captured mermaid. If the hull is breached, we can manage, but the others on board will be in serious danger. There were no other ships nearby, and given that the attack came from below, Wood could easily guess that the attackers were likely fishmen, even without Giant explicitly stating it. Fishmen and mermaids both lived on Fishman Island. Fishmen had fish-like faces and human bodies, often considered unattractive and discriminated against by humans. Mermaids, on the other hand, had human-like upper bodies and fishtails, typically possessing great beauty, often kept as pets by the wealthy in this world. Mermaids had the fastest swimming speed in the world, while fishmen, though slower, had strong combat abilities. One of the fishmen's favorite tactics for attacking human ships was to breach the hull, causing the ship to sink and leaving the humans helpless in the water. Because once in the water, the fishmen were invincible. Fishmen believed humans were an inferior race because they couldn't breathe underwater. In contrast, fishmen could move freely both on land and in the sea. From a biological standpoint, fishmen were indeed more evolved than humans. After all, they were amphibious and possessed intelligence equal to humans. Their ability to breathe underwater alone made them more suited to the world's environment. Wood and Giant's ship had just left the Sabati archipelago. Even if the ship sank, they could use moonwalk to return to the island safely. But what about the others on board? Not to mention their individual strengths, they were all chained up and locked in a large iron cage. If the ship sank, everyone except the mermaid would likely die. That was probably the fishmen's intention. They had chosen to attack now because, even for fishmen, it would be exhausting to swim across the open sea. And aside from the mermaid, the fishmen didn't care about the other slaves or their human captors. They weren't their kind, and their deaths wouldn't matter. Feeling the ship's continuous shaking, Giant immediately removed her outer clothes, revealing a bikini that caught Wood's attention. She was preparing to dive into the sea. Fighting fishmen in the water was a foolish move, but given the situation, Giant had no better options. "Let me go. You stay and protect everyone on board." Seeing Giant about to jump into the sea, Wood quickly removed his shirt and, before Giant could respond, jumped into the water. Humans had low visibility in the water, and fishmen were incredibly fast swimmers. With his mastery of observation hockey, Wood was indeed better suited for underwater combat against fishmen than Giant. Chapter 51, Are Fishmen Truly Invincible in the Sea? Human movement in the sea can never be compared to movement on land. Aside from the fatal weakness of not being able to breathe underwater, there's also the strong resistance from the water. This resistance greatly diminishes the power of punches, kicks, or slashes. Wood, who always wore an absurdly heavyweight training outfit during daily activities and training, had become accustomed to such gravity. Therefore, even now in the sea, the water resistance didn't affect Wood as much as one might expect. As soon as Wood plunged into the water, he saw several fishmen with various appearances under the ship, using their fins or fists to attack the bottom of the ship. Wood's entry into the water immediately caught the attention of the fishmen. There were 5 fishmen attacking the ship, and the leader appeared to be a tiger shark-type fishman, with a dorsal fin on its back and a mouth full of terrifying sharp teeth. Among the other fishmen, one seemed to be a swordfish, identifiable by its highly recognizable nose, and another might be an anglerfish. As for the other fishmen, Wood couldn't identify them because there are so many different species in the sea, and even fishmen of the same species can have variations. The fishmen, who had been focused on damaging the ship's hull, hadn't expected that a human would be so reckless as to jump into the sea to fight them. They smiled cruelly as they looked at Wood. The fishmen didn't know how strong the main combat forces on the ship were. To ensure a smooth rescue, their plan was to sink the ship methodically. But since the ship hadn't sunk yet and the opponent had already come down to die, the fishmen didn't see any need for restraint. Fishman pirate crews needed ships as well. Though they could breathe underwater, they couldn't cross oceans without a ship. Damaging the ship was just a way to force the enemy into the sea to fight. Now that someone had voluntarily jumped into the water, the fishmen didn't mind adding another ship to their spoils. Fishman karate, missed shark. The tiger shark fishman, upon seeing Wood enter the water with a sword, immediately showed a fierce gleam in its eyes. Its body began swimming at high speed, swiftly leaving behind its fishman companions as a charge toward Wood. This wasn't Wood's first time fighting fishmen. In Impel Down, there were also many fishmen imprisoned, some of whom were well-known figures among the fishmen. Fishman karate is a unique skill of all fishmen and mermaids in the One Piece world. Fishmen who master these techniques are considered top-notch among their kind. However, the fishman before Wood was different from those he had encountered in Impel Down. Wood could only say that fishmen in water were much stronger than those on land. Wood didn't believe that the tiger shark fishman before him was stronger than the fishman he had fought in Impel Down, but the speed at which this fishman charged toward him was truly astounding. The swimming speed of a tiger shark fishman is naturally fast in the sea, and with the addition of fishman karate techniques, it became as fast as a torpedo. As the tiger shark fishman charged toward him, Wood held his long sword horizontally, directly blocking the opponent's now razor-sharp dorsal fin. The impact from the high-speed swimming forced Wood back several dozen meters. The dorsal fin of the tiger shark fishman was incredibly hard and sharp. On land, it would be less effective, but in the sea, the high-speed swimming could even slice a small ship in half. The tiger shark fishman was confident that this attack would be successful, believing that humans in the sea couldn't possibly match fishmen in speed or reaction. However, to the tiger shark fishman's surprise, the human not only blocked the attack but also caused a faint trace of red to mix into the surrounding water. It wasn't the human's blood, but its own. The dorsal fin it was so proud of had been injured in the collision with a human. Being injured by a human, especially one in the sea, only further enraged the tiger shark fishman. As it crashed into Wood, it fiercely bit toward his waist. Marine 6 Styles, Iron Body, Iron Body. The tiger shark fishman was proud not only of its sharp dorsal fin but also of its teeth, capable of easily biting through rock. It couldn't believe that Wood's body could be as tough as his sword. Crack. With a crisp snapping sound, the tiger shark fishman was dumbfounded. The human's body was indeed tougher than its sword. The teeth, which could easily crush rocks, nearly shattered when they bit into Wood's waist. Iron Body, Smash. While the tiger shark fishman was still in shock at its inability to bite through the human's waist, a fist the size of a large pot suddenly slammed into its face. Wood didn't hold back with this punch. Although the water resistance was significant, his overwhelming physical strength, combined with the iron body technique and his considerable martial skills, was more than enough to send the much larger tiger shark fishman flying with a single uppercut. The tiger shark fishman's body, following the force of the blow, arced upward and away. The ships on the surface had stopped shaking, indicating that the fishmen had ceased their attack and were now engaged in battle with Wood. At the stern of the ship, there was a small sea king with the upper body of a lion and the lower body of a fish. Although it was a small sea king, its size was comparable to that of Wood's ship. This small sea king had appeared and attacked the ship shortly after Wood entered the water, seemingly in cahoots with the fishmen. However, the fishmen hadn't expected that besides Wood, there was another formidable individual on the ship. The sea king had just surfaced, but before it could roar to assert its presence, it was sliced into sashimi by a single strike from Jian. Now, Jian, holding her sword Konpira, stood in a bikini, exuding an aura that warned others to stay away. Her gaze remained fixed on the calm sea. It wasn't that Jian doubted Wood's strength, but humans were at a severe disadvantage when fighting fishmen in the sea, and they still didn't know how many fishmen they were up against. Jian wanted to jump into the sea to help Wood, but she was also worried that if she did, another sea king might suddenly appear and attack the ship. This time, it was just her and Wood escorting the ship. The others were all chained up, and those chains were specially made, with the only key in the hands of the celestial dragon who had purchased them. If she jumped into the sea to assist Wood and the Sea King attacked the ship again, everyone on board would be doomed. Chapter 52, Giant, I didn't expect you to be so playful whoosh. Just as Giant stood on the ship's deck, at a loss for what to do, the calm sea suddenly erupted with a huge splash. A figure shot out from the water like a fountain, flying into the air above the sea. There was no need to guess who it was. The figure launched into the air was the tiger shark fishman who had just been fighting Wood underwater. Even he couldn't believe it. Wood, a mere human, could unleash such powerful force even underwater. The strength and impact of the punch Wood delivered had even surpassed his fishman karate. As the tiger shark fishman flew into the air, he felt the intense pain in his dorsal fin and noticed the teeth that had been broken by Wood's punch. From this brief encounter, the tiger shark fishman understood that the human who had just entered the water was a formidable opponent. Rescuing his companions wouldn't be as simple as he initially thought. Having been punched out of the water, the tiger shark fishman looked at Wood's ship from a distance. What he saw made him overjoyed. Previously, the fishman had thought that the escorting guards would be numerous. However, apart from the man who had jumped into the sea, there was only one other guard on the ship. A human woman? Returning to fight the man underwater would likely result in another beating. So, after a brief hesitation, the tiger shark fishman changed his plan. Strong individuals in the sea weren't common, so it was unlikely that he would encounter two powerful opponents in one go. With this thought, the tiger shark fishman, instead of diving back into the sea, swam quickly toward Wood's ship. He assumed the human man was the strongest on board, but he never imagined he could capture the ship while his companion was still fighting. Seeing the tiger shark fishman suddenly shoot out of the water, Jian initially considered using moonwalk to capture and question him. But before she could act, she saw the tiger shark fishman grinning savagely as he charged toward her, so she decided not to bother. The tiger shark fishman swam at high speed, reaching the ship's side within seconds. This time, he didn't attack the ship but instead leaped onto the deck. Once on deck, the tiger shark fishman scanned the surroundings, wary of any ambushes and ready to jump back into the sea if necessary. After a quick glance, he confirmed that, apart from the caged slaves and the Dead Sea King, the only other person on board was the human woman in front of him. Seeing the Dead Sea King on the ship surprised the tiger shark fishman slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. There were only two people responsible for escorting the slaves, so their combat strength must be formidable. However, killing the Sea King they had sent to attack didn't prove much. The tiger shark fishman could have done it too, otherwise, how could he have kept it as a pet? Human girl, you killed my pet, so now you might have to replace it. If you don't want to be torn apart by Lord Tiger Shark, release my companions now and steer the ship according to my instructions. The tiger shark fishman was sure that the woman before him wasn't as ridiculously strong as the man who had jumped into the sea. Although his strength would be greatly reduced on land, the tiger shark fishman believed that the woman must have exhausted much of her energy to kill the Sea King they had sent. No matter how strong that human was, he still needed to breathe. If the ship sailed away, the man would eventually drown in the sea. The tiger shark fishman's priority was to take control of the ship. If the woman was smart, he might even spare her life. Just as humans hated fishmen and liked to enslave them, some fishmen, in retaliation, would capture humans to serve as slaves. Although fishmen and humans had different aesthetic standards, the tiger shark fishman knew that a woman like Jian, who was both beautiful and powerful, was undoubtedly a high-grade prize. Jian didn't waste words with the grinning tiger shark fishman. She simply thrust her sword, Kanpira, into the deck and then charged at him with bare hands. Seeing Jian rush at him unarmed enraged the tiger shark fishman. He felt insulted as a proud fishman warrior. How could a swordswoman, who had abandoned her sword, expect to fight a fishman karate master like him with bare hands? Even though they weren't fighting in the sea, where fishmen had a significant advantage, their physical strength was still far superior to ordinary humans on land. But was Jian an ordinary person? Despite her slender figure and curvaceous body, Jian was a superhuman who had mastered all 6 forms of the Marine 6 Styles techniques and was a highly anticipated female Marine officer who had outshone many male Marine elites of her generation. The tiger shark fishman's usual assumptions didn't apply to Jian. If they were fighting in the sea, he might have stood a chance. But on land, how could an ordinary fishman defeat a highly regarded Marine headquarters lieutenant? The result was predictable. The tiger shark fishman was swiftly defeated, even faster than in his fight with Wood. Jian used only instant transmission to close the distance, followed by a heavy elbow strike, quickly ending the battle. You couldn't beat Wood in the sea, so why did you think you could crush me on land? With one foot, Jian pressed the tiger shark fishman's head into the deck, clearly displeased with how fishmen evaluated their opponents. Why did they think she, Jian, was easier to bully than Wood, just because she was a woman? The tiger shark fishman was extremely frustrated. Wood had already broken all his left teeth with one punch, and now Jian had shattered the teeth on his right side with a single stomp. As Jian questioned the tiger shark fishman about the situation underwater and the number of fishmen, there was another disturbance on the sea's surface. Wood emerged from the water, carrying a fishman in each hand. He threw them onto the deck and then jumped aboard himself, witnessing Jian interrogating the fishman underfoot. Jian, I didn't know you were into this kind of thing. Chapter 53, Is this what you learned in Impel Down? When Wood made his comment, Giant quickly realized that her actions were a bit unseemly. Feeling both embarrassed and annoyed, she stomped on the Tiger Shark Fishman's head again, pressing it further into the deck. Tiger Shark Fishman, I didn't even say anything, and I'm still getting beaten? My head is being stomped into the deck, and I can't see anything with your foot covering my eyes. Wood, forget what you just saw. It's fine. Actually, your actions fit your dominant demeanor quite well. I knew someone in Impel Down named Sadi, and she's even more. Before Wood could finish, he noticed that Kanpira was already at his throat, and Giant was glaring at him with a dangerous look. I said to forget what you just saw. Or do I need to personally help you reorganize your memory? Facing the intimidating Giant, Wood quickly surrendered, raising his hands in mock surrender. After all, her impressive figure convinced him it was better to comply, at least for now. Looking at the lanternfish fishman and the squid-like fishman that Wood had brought aboard, Giant remembered the situation at hand. Were there only these 3 fishmen attacking our ship? Hearing Giant's question, Wood glanced at the dead Sea King on the ship and the beaten-down Tiger Shark Fishman. He had a general understanding of what had happened while he was underwater. There were about 8 fishmen attacking us. The others fled while I surfaced for air. But the guy you just stomped into the deck seems to be their leader. If you want more information, he's the one to ask. The Tiger Shark Fishman, who had just fainted from blissful unconsciousness, was quickly slapped awake. When he opened his eyes, he was greeted by Wood's bright smile and Giant standing with her arms crossed, making her figure even more pronounced. If you think I'll betray my comrades, think again. We fishmen would never sell out our own kind. The Tiger Shark Fishman, having failed to save his comrades and now captured himself, knew what fate awaited him. Still, he tried to maintain his pride. But despite his bold words, Wood noticed that the fishman only dared to look at him while speaking. Whenever his gaze fell on Giant, it would quickly shift away. It couldn't be helped. To the Tiger Shark Fishman, both Wood and Giant were exceptionally strong humans, but Giant had left a much deeper psychological scar. In the fishman's mind, Giant was like a devil. If not for the remarkable healing abilities of fishmen and the fact that sharks can regrow teeth quickly, he wouldn't even be able to speak properly now. Giant, it seems you have a stronger influence on him. How about you handle the questioning? A few more stomps might make him talk. Before Wood could finish his sentence, he felt a murderous gaze from behind. Sensing danger, he promptly shut up. Not only was Giant well endowed, but she was also a Marine lieutenant. As a mere high-ranking grunt, Wood realized that the tough jobs still fell to him. Listen, my fishman friend, I suggest you speak up soon. I used to work at Impel Down, and I've seen plenty of methods for torturing and interrogating prisoners. If you wait until you're in pain to talk, it'll be too late. Despite Wood's words, the Tiger Shark Fishman maintained his defiant attitude, convinced that Wood was nothing more than a paper tiger, lacking the intimidation of the woman standing next to him. A few minutes later. Stop. Please stop. I'll tell you everything. A few minutes earlier, the Tiger Shark Fishman had been full of defiance. Now, he was screaming in agony, his face showing utter despair. It was well known that during Wood's time working at Impel Down, he was on particularly good terms with Chief Warden Sadi. But who was Sadi? She was infamous throughout Impel Down as a sadist, with countless methods for torturing prisoners. Wood had naturally picked up a few tricks from her. At this moment, the Tiger Shark Fishman was tied to a post, facing it with his rear exposed. Various devices had been added to his nether regions, which would likely make him a frequent visitor to the proctologist if he ever made it back. Is this what you learned at Impel Down? Giant asked, looking at the Tiger Shark Fishman's defeated expression. Her gaze toward Wood was filled with disdain, and she subtly moved away from him. Well. The method may be crude, but you can't deny the results are effective, right? Besides, this is nothing. Sadi is far more ruthless. Many prisoners who were once tough guys would go weak at the knees just seeing her. As Wood explained, he noticed that Giant's expression had darkened even more. Didn't you say earlier that my personality was like that of your friend Sadi? Giant hadn't paid much attention to Wood's comment earlier since she didn't know who Sadi was. But now it was clear that Sadi was undoubtedly a sadist, and Wood comparing her to Sadi meant he thought she was a sadist too. After a brief chaotic scene, the farce finally ended. From their interrogation of the Tiger Shark Fishman, Wood and Giant learned that he was part of a fishman pirate crew. Their leader was the infamous Fisher Tiger. At this point, Tiger had not yet climbed the red line to marry Joyce, nor had he freed the slaves to rescue his people, so technically, he wasn't a hero to the fishmen yet. However, that didn't mean Fisher Tiger was an unknown figure. Though not yet a major player on the world stage, Tiger was already a significant figure on Fishman Island and held considerable respect among his people. The fishmen longed to live on land, to see the sun and forests, and the adventure group Tiger had formed was helping them achieve that dream. The Tiger Shark Fishman and his group had accidentally discovered a kidnapped mermaid on Sabati Archipelago. They had intended to rescue their comrade and earn Tiger's admiration, but instead, they had bitten off more than they could chew. Chapter 54, The Fishman is actually one of Tiger's subordinates. At the start, the Tiger Shark Fishman and his group had already tried to make a move on Sabati Archipelago. However, due to the large number of people at the auction house and the fact that they were fighting on land, where they had no advantage, they were forced to retreat and reconsider their strategy. They decided to wait until the ship transporting their comrade was at sea before taking action. Once at sea, they believed that they would be unbeatable. In the water, these fishmen could take on 10 of the auction house's hired guards at once. But, as they say, plans never keep up with changes. They did manage to intercept Wood's ship as planned. What they hadn't anticipated, however, was how powerful Wood and Jian were. They were no match for them at all. When Jian heard the name Fisher Tiger, she didn't have much of a reaction because she had no idea who he was. Jian had some knowledge of pirates with bounties over 100 million from Marine headquarters, but the name Fisher Tiger was completely unfamiliar to her. To her, either this person wasn't a pirate, or he wasn't an important one. At least, that's how it seemed to Jian at the moment. Fisher Tiger. Compared to Jian's lack of response, Wood's expression changed drastically. He even felt like they were in big trouble. According to the original storyline, Fisher Tiger was supposed to climb the Red Line and attack the Holy Land of Mary Jo Eyes when Hancock was 15 years old. That means it was supposed to happen about 3 years from now. Fisher Tiger, this legendary hero, would then deliver a resounding slap to the Celestial Dragons, making the entire world remember his name. But now, Wood and Jian had beaten up Tiger's subordinates, and some survivors had escaped. What would happen next? Based on what Wood knew of Fisher Tiger's character, if he found out that the fishmen from Fishman Island had been captured and taken to Mary Jo Eyes, and that even his comrades were caught, would he just let it go? Of course not. If Fisher Tiger could simply let that slide, he wouldn't be the hero who stormed Mary Jo Eyes. Setting aside Fisher Tiger's combat abilities, Wood really didn't want to face such a character unless absolutely necessary. Their actions could even change history, potentially causing Fisher Tiger to climb the Red Line and attack Mary Jo Eyes earlier than originally planned. Is this Fisher Tiger really that formidable? Jian asked, noticing Wood's unusual reaction. Yes, he's quite a remarkable figure. He's bold and extremely loyal, and anyone from Fishman Island who meets him would call him Boss Tiger. He's a master of Fishman karate, and in terms of individual combat strength, he might even be stronger than King Neptune of Fishman Island. Wood explained. Hearing Jian's question, the previously despondent Tiger Shark Fishman perked up, ready to speak about his idol. But he realized that Wood seemed to know a lot about Boss Tiger. And unlike most humans who despised fishmen, the Tiger Shark Fishman noticed that Wood spoke with genuine respect when talking about Boss Tiger. So, what you're saying is that this Fisher Tiger might come after us to rescue his comrades? Jian asked. Not might. He definitely will. So we need to speed up and get these people to Mary Jo Eyes as quickly as possible. We originally planned to hand them over to the Celestial Dragons and then carry out our plan, but now this has come up. Wood replied. Even for Marines from Marine headquarters, entering the Holy Land of Mary Jo Eyes where the Celestial Dragons lived wasn't a simple matter. Moreover, if anything happened to the slaves during transport, Wood and Jian, who were responsible for escorting them, would also be held accountable. Wood and Jian's original plan was to deliver these slaves to Mary Jo Eyes, then secretly cause some trouble and teach the hated Celestial Dragons a lesson. Once inside Mary Jo Eyes, they would have more room to operate. But Wood hadn't anticipated an attack by fishmen, and even less so that the attackers would be Fisher Tiger's subordinates. Sneaking into Mary Jo Eyes under the guise of Marines and causing some trouble might have been covered up by Fleet Admiral Sengoku. But if they ended up freeing the slaves, that would be a different story. Even if the Marines tried to cover it up, the World Government's Intelligence Agency, CP, would definitely investigate. Fisher Tiger wasn't just any random pirate, and he had powerful allies like Jinbi. On land, Wood didn't think he and Jian would lose. But at sea, fighting fishmen of this caliber was a different story. Their chances of winning weren't great. Even if they tried to explain that they were just Marines, Tiger and his crew probably wouldn't believe them. Helping the Celestial Dragons transport slaves and defeating the very comrades they were trying to rescue. Could such Marines really be righteous? And since this mission involved the world nobles, the Celestial Dragons, failure would not look good for Wood and Jian either. Stuck in a difficult situation, their best option now was to deliver the slaves to Mary Jo Eyes as quickly as possible. As long as the Celestial Dragons took over, their mission wouldn't be considered a failure. And if Fisher Tiger didn't follow them into Mary Jo Eyes, they could proceed with their original plan. But if Fisher Tiger did storm Mary Jo Eyes, earlier than in the original timeline, they would just have to make the best of the chaos. Even though some fishmen had escaped to report back, Fisher Tiger and his crew were probably not on Sabati Archipelago yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent these lower-ranking fishmen to attempt the rescue. Fishmen were fast swimmers, but Wood figured they still had some time. Following Wood's suggestion, they increased their sailing speed and didn't stop to rest even at night. Mary Jo Eyes, the Holy Land, is located at the summit of the Red Line, between the first half and the second half of the Grand Line. It's one of the two routes to reach the New World. Sabati Archipelago is at the end of the first half of the Grand Line. The journey from there isn't too far, but it still takes about 10 to 15 days. During these days, Wood and Giant took turns keeping watch and steering the ship. In his spare time, Wood chatted with the three Hancock sisters, trying to gain their favor. Unfortunately, while Mary and Sonia were somewhat swayed by Wood's generous food offerings and were willing to believe he was a good person forced into a difficult situation, Hancock remained wary of Wood and continued to be suspicious of his intentions. Chapter 55, You Don't Think I'm a Lilicon, Do You? The journey, which originally required 15 days, was shortened to just 10 days thanks to continuous accelerated sailing. There are two main routes to reach the Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes. One route involves requesting permission from the world government, allowing direct passage across the summit of the Red Line to reach Mary Jo Eyes. Although this requires a lot of money and time for the application process, it's very safe. The other route involves coating the ship with Yarukim and mangrove resin and diving 10,000 meters below to Fishman Island, passing through a giant cave beneath the Red Line to enter the New World. This path comes with potential hazards such as sea kings, underwater volcanoes, and even if one reaches Mary Jo Eyes, they still have to face the natural barrier of the Red Line. Since Wood and the others were escorting slaves for the Celestial Dragons, they naturally took the official route. Although they had to pass through multiple layers of checks, their documentation was complete, and they quickly passed through all the checkpoints. It's worth mentioning that the fishmen they captured were released by Wood and his group before reaching the Red Line. The reason for doing this, aside from not wanting to let the Celestial Dragons gain more fishmen slaves, was to earn Fisher Tiger's initial trust. Initially, Giant did not agree with Wood's decision. She felt that the tiger shark fishmen were no good and thought that if they weren't going to let the Celestial Dragons have them, they should at least be killed to prevent them from causing trouble for others in the future. However, Wood believed that it wasn't worth making an enemy of Tiger just for a fleeting moment of satisfaction. In the end, after Wood persuaded her and confirmed that the tiger shark fishmen were not wanted pirates but rather adventurers, Giant reluctantly agreed. Don't worry, I'll find a way to get you out of the Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes, and back to your homeland. That's a promise, Mary, Sonia. As they were about to reach the summit of the Red Line, where the Holy Land Mary Jo Eyes is located, Mary and Sonia, who were locked in a cage, couldn't hold back their tears due to their young age. Although they hadn't gone hungry these past days, listening to the other slaves talk about the horrors of the Celestial Dragons had filled them with deep fear of the unknown future. All Wood could do at the moment was extend his pinky finger into the cage and make a pinky promise with the two little girls. On the way to Mary Jo Eyes, Wood had considered leaving some of the slaves on islands they passed, planning to come back for them later. After all, the Celestial Dragons were most interested in the female mermaid among the group. As for the others, as long as they weren't of a rare species, the Celestial Dragons likely wouldn't care much if a few ordinary humans went missing. However, the chains on Hancock and her sisters were special. While not as dangerous as the explosive collars they would wear later, they weren't something that could be easily removed. Leaving these shackled people on a deserted island would likely be just as dangerous for them. Moreover, Hancock would one day become a peerless beauty and the love fruit would play a crucial role. After some hesitation, Wood decided not to take the risk. You despicable liar. Mary, Sonia, don't be fooled by his righteous appearance. He's taking us to the Celestial Dragons, and now he says he'll save us. Isn't that laughable? Seeing Wood smiling and making promises to her sisters Mary and Sonia, Hancock glared at him with contempt, as if she were looking at scum. After spending more than 10 days together, Hancock's attitude towards Wood remained hostile. Yet, she had briefly entertained the hope that Wood was different from the others, especially after he released those fishmen. She had hoped he might also release her and her sisters. But reality was harsh. The man before her was no different from the others. He talked big, but in the end, he didn't dare to defy the Celestial Dragons. If he hadn't given them hope at the start, it would have been better. Hancock had just started to believe in him, only to have him turn around and deliver them to the Celestial Dragons. Giving them hope and then crushing it made Hancock loathe Wood even more. Seeing him now, still deceiving Mary and Sonia like they were children, made her feel sick. The Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes, is the headquarters of the world government, the residence of the world nobles, the Celestial Dragons. With the massive red line as a natural barrier, Mary Jo Eyes is almost impregnable, even more so than Marine headquarters. People who enter here, unless recognized by the world nobles, have never been known to escape. For this reason, Hancock believed that Wood was simply deceiving them. Deceiving you wouldn't benefit me in any way. Besides, I never break a promise with children. My name is Wood. If I break my promise, you can come after me for revenge in the future. Wood wasn't bothered by Hancock's hatred. Considering her circumstances, anyone in her place would probably feel the same. It seems our seaman recruit Wood is quite concerned about those little girls. Do you know them? Or is one of them also a big shot like Fisher Tiger? Or do you have some peculiar hobby? I mean, that black-haired girl does look quite good, but it seems she's not interested in you. Giant had been observing Wood for a while. Compared to the other slaves, he did seem particularly attentive to these three little girls. Logically, shouldn't the most special being on the ship be that female mermaid? Giant had secretly observed the three Amazon girls, but she hadn't found anything special about them. Their physical abilities and backgrounds were average, and they weren't devil fruit users like Dina. But Giant knew Wood well. If he was so attentive to strangers, it meant these strangers weren't ordinary. You don't think I'm a Lilicon, do you? I have a younger sister back on Maple Island. Seeing them, who are about the same age, becoming slaves to the celestial dragons. It makes me want to help them for once. Is that so wrong? Hiding my strength doesn't mean I don't have it, nor does it mean I lack the determination to grow stronger. If needed, I'll give my all without reservation. Chapter 56, The Fishman Hero Who Got Wind of the News. In the world of pirates, whether it's swordsmanship, martial arts, or hockey, all are closely tied to one's beliefs and determination. Wood may currently be lying low, but that's simply due to his cautious nature. He likes keeping a low profile and playing the part of a background character, but that doesn't mean he lacks the resolve to become stronger. If he didn't want to grow stronger, why would he choose to join the Navy, and why would he sneak off to train on the back mountain while others were resting? Take, for example, red-haired Shanks, who stands at the pinnacle of hockey in the pirate world. Not only does he possess the rare conqueror's hockey, but his hockey is also of a very high level, earning him respect from almost everyone on the seas. But is Shanks flashy in his actions? On the contrary, among the four emperors, he is probably the most low-key, almost like a small and transparent figure. Big Mom founded Todo Land. Kaido built his own devil fruit army, and both are major players in the underworld. Whitebeard commands the largest fleet among the four emperors, with the most sons in the world. And then there's Shanks. His crew members seem like background characters, and he likes to hang out in a bar in the weakest sea. Without the author's introduction, no one would even consider him one of the four emperors. The world is harsh. Children like Kane and the three Hancock sisters are not uncommon. Wood can't save everyone, but when something happens right in front of him and he has the power to help, he can't just stand by and do nothing. Just like when he first arrived in this world, even though he was weak and terrified of the fierce pirates, he still stepped forward when he saw Aang in danger. At that time, Aang was just a familiar stranger living on the same island as Wood. He may not have the power to become a hero who saves the entire world, but when faced with genuine cries for help right in front of him, Wood couldn't turn a blind eye. The people taking over the slaves from Wood were not the celestial dragons themselves but members of the Cypher Paul agent organization, who serve as their lackeys. Usually, the celestial dragons don't bother dealing with lowly individuals like them. Moreover, after handing over the slaves, the Cypher Paul member agents need to conduct an investigation to ensure there are no dangerous elements among the slaves who might approach the celestial dragons. As for Wood and Giant, they were promptly expelled from the Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes. After all, as the Holy Land, it was no place for lowly people like them to stay. Meanwhile, the fishman who escaped from Wood's grasp managed to return to Fishman Island. A few days later, they finally made contact with the fishman adventurer, Fisher Tiger. Upon learning that his compatriots had been captured while trying to rescue a mermaid and taken to the Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes, Fisher Tiger was naturally furious and immediately decided to head for Mary Jo Eyes. Compared to the widespread human population, the number of fishmen is significantly smaller. This is why, despite their generally superior combat abilities compared to ordinary humans, fishmen have always been in a disadvantaged position. But it's also for this reason that the fishmen are incredibly united, especially those who follow Fisher Tiger, who consider their fellow fishmen as their brothers. Most of the fishmen naturally supported Fisher Tiger's decision to go to Mary Jo Eyes to rescue their compatriots. They were willing to follow him through hell or high water at his command. However, there were also dissenting voices, such as the more level-headed Jinbai. Many fishmen who had lived their entire lives on Fishman Island might not know what the so-called Holy Land, Mary Jo Eyes, truly is. Some might even think it's just an ordinary island. But Jinbai knew very well that it wouldn't be easy to land on Mary Joai's, and even if they made it there, they might not only fail to rescue their compatriots but could also end up losing their own lives. Jinbai, what do you mean? Are you trying to stop us and Tiger from rescuing our fellow fishmen? Arlong, who had been following Tiger for a few years now, had quickly become a leader within the group due to his fierce and combative nature, and his voice carried some weight. No, I'm not saying we shouldn't rescue our comrades. I'm just suggesting that we need to plan this carefully. Mary Joai's is the headquarters of the human world government, located at the summit of the Red Line. The defenses there must be extraordinarily tight. To avoid any mishaps, I believe we need to carefully plan the rescue operation. Jinbai was cautious, while Arlong and others were more aggressive, so it wasn't long before the two sides started arguing loudly. Jinbai thought Arlong was all brawn and no brains, and that acting impulsively would only get everyone killed. Arlong, on the other hand, thought Jinbai lacked courage, that he was undermining their morale while boosting the enemies. The idea of attacking the stronghold of the highest human authority. Wouldn't that be amazing? If they could wreak havoc there, would humans dare to look down on fishmen in the future? Enough. Jinbai is right, Mary Joai's is extremely dangerous, and we must not be careless. But, hearing Tiger agree with him, Jinbai breathed a huge sigh of relief. But just as he was about to present his plan, Tiger suddenly continued. But we can't ignore our comrades who have been captured. We all know what kind of scum the celestial dragons are. Anyone who's been to Sabati Archipelago knows it all too well. In the hands of those degenerates, who can say whether our comrades can hold on until we rescue them? Every moment we delay might mean another comrade dies at their hands or suffers unspeakable torture from the celestial dragons. So, I've decided to go to Mary Joai's to rescue our comrades alone. That way, even if I run into danger, I'll be the only one who can't make it back. But if I succeed, I'll naturally bring our other comrades back with me. As mentioned before, there are two ways to reach Mary Joai's. One is the official route that Wood and the others took. The other route involves traveling underwater from Fishman Island, bypassing the Red Line through an underwater cave. This second route is more dangerous due to the presence of sea kings and underwater volcanoes, but these dangers are greatly minimized for fishmen who can breathe underwater. Even though coated ships can travel underwater, if the soap bubbles burst, even the strongest human would be instantly crushed by the immense water pressure or suffocate. But for fishmen, this isn't an issue at all. Taking the underwater route also allows them to easily bypass the heavy defenses of Mary Joai's. As for the Red Line, Tiger had already come up with a strategy. Just like in the original story, he planned to climb the Red Line by hand, bypassing the defenses and directly entering Mary Joai's from behind. Chapter 57. The opportunity has arrived, hasn't it? Traversing the underwater volcanic region to reach the Red Line, this extremely long journey had already drained a lot of energy, not to mention the need to climb the Red Line by hand afterward. Tiger decided to go alone for a reason. Even among the physically strong fishmen, few could withstand such a massive energy drain. If that's the case, count me in too. If Boss Tiger is going, then I, Arlong, will naturally be the first to follow. Don't worry about my stamina. Shark-type fishmen swim fast. Upon hearing that Tiger had made his decision, Jinbai knew he could no longer say anything to stop him, so he could only express his desire to join as well. Seeing Jinbai join in, the other fishmen, including Arlong, naturally also expressed their willingness to go together. Although this mission was a near-death experience, Tiger's reputation on Fishman Island was so immense that as long as he called, many fishmen would be willing to live and die with him. Besides, even though the mission was dangerous, if they successfully rescued their comrades from Mary Joai's, they would undoubtedly become heroes of the entire Fishman Island. Many volunteered to go, but Fisher Tiger didn't want too many of his comrades to take the risk, so he only selected a few strong ones, including Jinbai and Arlong, to go with him. Fishmen aren't as fast as mermaids in the water, but they are still incredibly quick, especially since Fisher Tiger and his group belong to naturally fast-swimming species. Wood and his team had left 10 days earlier than Tiger and his group, but after just 2 days at Mary Joai's, Tiger's Fishman team arrived. To reach their comrades quickly, Tiger and his team took the most dangerous route, directly crossing the underwater volcanic region. Luckily, the volcanoes weren't active at the time, otherwise, they might have lost half their strength before even reaching their comrades. The fishmen that Wood had released, Sharkman and Lantern Fishman, had not chosen to leave the waters around Mary Joai's over the past 2 days. They had initially planned to return, but thinking that their previously departed comrades might take action, they decided to stay on standby nearby. And as they predicted, Boss Tiger and the others were rapidly approaching their location. You might wonder how they knew this. Because, as Arlong's subordinates, they had his vivre card. At that moment, the paper was continuously trembling in their direction, indicating that Arlong was getting closer. Weren't you captured after a failed rescue attempt? How come you're here now? When Tiger and his group approached the red line, Sharkman and the others used the Vivre card to find them. Seeing his subordinates safe and sound before him, Arlong was momentarily stunned. This clearly didn't match the information they had received. It was those two who were escorting the slaves. They said we weren't the target of their mission, and they didn't want to benefit the despicable celestial dragons, so they released us. Hearing Sharkman recount the situation, Arlong was baffled. Could humans really be so kind-hearted? Moreover, from Sharkman's account, it was clear that the skilled man and woman also despised the celestial dragons, so why were they helping to escort the slaves? No matter what those two humans' origins or motives are, our initial goal hasn't changed. Isn't there still a mermaid that was captured? And there must be many other fishmen from Fishman Island who were taken here before, right? Since we've come this far, there's no way we can return empty-handed. When Sharkman learned of Boss Tiger's plan to come to Mary Jo Eyes and his bold idea to climb the red line by hand, he was thrilled beyond belief. He had been with the group for a year but had yet to achieve anything significant, so he had decided to try rescuing people by attacking Wood's group without informing Boss Tiger. Now, hearing Boss Tiger's plan, it was clear they were preparing to do something big, and Sharkman was eager to be part of it. Boss Tiger, Brother Jinbai, Brother Arlong, if you're planning to climb the red line, I know the best spot. After observing for the past 2 days, I've found that the guards are weakest at that location. If we climb up under the cover of darkness, we can bypass the defenses ahead and directly enter the Celestial Dragon's residential area. In another part of the red line near Mary Jo Eyes, Wooden Giant had been there for 2 days. 2 days earlier, after handing over the slaves, they had been lying low beneath the red line. Having been idle for 2 days, Giant looked impatiently at Wood, who was calmly cleaning his long sword, and said, "How long do we have to wait for this opportunity you mentioned? Our mission has a deadline, and if we don't report back to Marine headquarters soon, they'll start getting suspicious if something goes wrong. If we don't take action tonight, once those slaves are sent to the Celestial Dragon's residence, you won't be able to save anyone, and you won't be able to keep your promise to those Amazonian kids." After taking the slaves from Wood, they weren't immediately handed over to the Celestial Dragons. They were subjected to a period of training to ensure they wouldn't pose a threat to the Celestial Dragons before being sent to them. If Tiger and his group didn't act soon, once Hancock and the others were sent to the Celestial Dragon's residence, Wooden Giant's mission would become even more difficult. Wood wasn't sure whether Tiger would come to Mary Jo Eyes, given that according to the original story, he wouldn't appear for a few more years. Then let's stick to the original plan. You create a distraction, and I'll try to steal the keys. Whether the slaves can escape from Mary Jo Eyes depends on their own luck. After some hesitation, Wooden Giant decided to take action that night. If Hancock and the others were sent to the inner areas of Mary Jo Eyes, even if they created chaos, it would be difficult for Hancock and her group to escape successfully. Just as they were about to move, there was a massive commotion at the top of the red line, in the holy land of Mary Jo Eyes. Because it was nighttime, the disturbance was even more noticeable. The orange-red flames illuminated half the sky, making it particularly striking in the dark night. You see, the opportunity has arrived. Chapter 58, Wooden Giant infiltrate Mary Jo Eyes. If only Wood and Giant were involved, even if they executed their plan perfectly, it would be inevitable that suspicion would fall on them. After all, the only strangers who had recently entered Mary Jo Eyes were the two of them. If the slaves they escorted started causing problems shortly after they left, even the most foolish of the Celestial Dragons would connect the dots. Although they had not revealed their identities earlier, this escort mission was ultimately commissioned by the world government through the Navy. Whether Fleet Admiral Sengoku could withstand the pressure afterward was uncertain. However, if Fisher Tiger and his group made a move, things would be different. Wooden Giant could simply take advantage of the chaos. The Celestial Dragons would likely only remember Tiger as the main culprit and wouldn't pay much attention to two insignificant figures like them. Tiger and his group would need to spend a significant amount of time climbing the red line by hand, but for Wooden Giant, who could use Moonwalk, it was a simple task. While using Moonwalk to ascend Mary Jo Eyes, Wood also took out some pre-prepared equipment and applied makeup to his face, disguising himself as a fish man. Seeing the fishy-smelling props in his hand, Giant showed a look of disgust and said, "So that's why you've been catching fish the past 2 days? Just to frame the fishmen? Looks like you're convinced that the fishman named Fisher Tiger will come to save them. I've said it before, if the fishman is indeed Fisher Tiger, then he will definitely come. And framing is such an ugly word. Even if we don't make a move, Fisher Tiger's actions will certainly make him a wanted man. Now, by disguising ourselves as fishmen, we're helping out, and there are probably some of his compatriots among the Celestial Dragon slaves. It's a win-win situation, so what's wrong with that?" Unlike in the original story where Tiger acted alone, this time, with the addition of Jinbai and Arlong, Mary Jo Eyes was in even greater chaos. As the residence of the world nobles and the headquarters of the world government, the center of power, even the celestial dragons themselves couldn't have imagined that anyone would dare to audaciously attack this place. Tiger's group appeared in a less guarded rear area and, taking advantage of the nighttime, quickly infiltrated deep into Mary Jo Eyes. When they saw their fellow fishmen, tortured and barely alive, in the celestial dragon's residence, the fishmen warriors went berserk. To vent his anger, Tiger chose to set fire to Mary Jo Eyes, both to express the fishmen's wrath and to plunge the place into complete chaos. Mary Jo Eyes did have considerable defensive strength, but when the fire spread throughout the city, the world government's Cipher Pol agent intelligence agency's first priority wasn't to capture Tiger and his fishmen but to protect the celestial dragons. The reason was simple: slaves could be recaptured, criminals could be hunted down, but if anything happened to the celestial dragons, they would all be in serious trouble. Since the incident occurred suddenly and late at night, even though Mary Jo Eyes immediately contacted the Navy headquarters for reinforcements, it was impossible for the ships to arrive immediately. As Tiger's group freed more and more slaves, the size of the uprising grew. The slaves chosen by the celestial dragons were not ordinary. They were either exceptionally beautiful or strong enough to entertain their masters. Once these people were freed from their cages, their long-held anger towards the celestial dragons erupted. Most of them didn't even care about escaping, they only wanted to kill the celestial dragons to vent their fury. Anger and hatred acted like gunpowder, igniting the entire Mary Jo Eyes. The Cipher Pol agents sent to stop the rebellion, overwhelmed in numbers, suffered heavy casualties. Meanwhile, Wooden Giant, who had climbed the red line from another location, looked at the chaotic scene in Mary Jo Eyes with mixed feelings. Just a few days ago, this place was filled with luxury and grandeur, but now it was engulfed in flames. Indeed, no matter how oppressed people are, once their anger reaches its limit, they can destroy everything in their path. Let's split up. Based on the observations from the past few days, the celestial dragons' residential areas should be over here and over there. According to the slave auction house, the celestial dragon who bought this group of slaves is named St. Charlos. The keys to the slaves' chain should be kept by the celestial dragons. I'll go after St. Charlos, you go after the other keys. Since we're here to rescue, let's save as many as we can. The chains binding the slaves were made of sea stone, something even swordsmen like Wood and Giant couldn't break. So, if they wanted to free the slaves, the keys were essential. The chaos in Mary Jo Eyes made it easier for Wood and Giant to sneak into the celestial dragons' residences. Rescuing is fine, but try not to harm the celestial dragons, even though they are indeed repulsive. Before they split up, Giant reminded Wood. To be honest, things had escalated far beyond Giant's expectations. As a principled Marine, Giant disliked the celestial dragons' ways. Originally, she only wanted to inconvenience them a little, but she didn't expect things to spiral out of control. Wood didn't know the exact location of St. Charles' residence, and since each celestial dragon's estate in Mary Jo Eyes was like a large manor, it was difficult to find. When in doubt, ask someone. After parting ways with Giant, Wood sneaked into the largest nearby manor. Given the size of the manor-like structures, the main bedroom of a celestial dragon would likely be in the most grandiose building. Though Mary Jo Eyes was in chaos, with most of the defenders sent to suppress the slave uprising or protect the celestial dragons, Wood anticipated some resistance but found his infiltration surprisingly easy, with no opposition at all. The world government's Cipher Pol agents were skilled in Marine 6 styles, 6 powers, and were as strong as Marine officers. Wood hadn't expected an easy mission, but until he reached the main bedroom of the celestial dragon, he hadn't encountered a single living soul. Chapter 59, Don't You Love Playing Games the Most? In a lavishly decorated room filled with various exquisite art pieces, a deeply disturbing scene was unfolding. 2 twin girls were tied up on a bed, while a fat man was relentlessly whipping them, ignoring their sobbing cries. Sensing that there were no other presences in the room, Wood stopped hiding and slowly approached the fat man from behind. The fat man, who was previously engrossed in his violent acts, heard footsteps behind him and assumed it was one of his guards. Without even turning around, he angrily shouted. I've already told you, there's no need for guards in here. This is the holy land of Mary Jo Eyes, and I am a world noble, a celestial dragon named Charles Saint. What can those filthy fishmen do to me? If you come in here and ruin my fun again, I'll make sure you're one of the slaves in the cage by tomorrow. Charles Saint, the celestial dragon, was about to mount another one of the girls after seeing that the other had stopped breathing, when he noticed that the person behind him hadn't left. Turning around in anger to order the intruder to leave, the words caught in his throat and he couldn't speak. It wasn't that Charles Saint didn't want to speak, he simply couldn't. His throat was being tightly squeezed by a hand as strong as an iron vice, lifting him easily off the ground. Only now could Charles Saint clearly see that the person behind him wasn't a lackey from the Cypher Paul agent organization, but an ugly fishman reeking of fish. You seem to think that with your status as a world noble, a fishman wouldn't dare harm you. So, how do you feel now? Surprised? Shocked? The fishman who appeared was none other than Wood himself. To be honest, Wood's disguise wasn't particularly good, but it was night, and Charles Saint, who was evidently quite engrossed in his perverse games, hadn't bothered to light up the room much. Naturally, he mistook Wood for one of the rebelling fishmen. This Charles Saint was clearly someone who didn't know the value of life. Even though Mary Joyce was in chaos, as a privileged celestial dragon, he was entitled to protection. However, he believed that even if the slaves revolted, they wouldn't dare touch him, a world noble, so he had dismissed the Cypher Paul guards and continued with his depraved games. Do you know where the residence of Charles Saint is, another celestial dragon in Mary Joyce? Wood asked as he glanced at the dying girl on the bed and tossed Charles Saint aside in disgust. As soon as Charles Saint had caught his breath, he didn't think to answer Wood's question. Instead, filled with rage, he started shouting at Wood. You bastard! Do you know who I am? How dare you lay a hand on me? I'll have the Marines slaughter all of you fishmen on Fishman Island. Before he could finish, his short, fat body flew horizontally through the air and slammed into the ornate gold bedpost. When he got up, half of his face was swollen, and several bloody teeth had fallen out. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. Either tell me where Charles Saint lives, or I'll kill you and ask someone else. You still think you can threaten me with your world noble status in a situation like this? I knew celestial dragons were stupid, but I didn't know they were this stupid. Charles Saint's threats were foolish, but that's how most celestial dragons are. Living in the lap of luxury, they considered themselves superior to everyone else, even too proud to breathe the same air as ordinary people. Arrogance and madness were their trademarks, and their world noble status as a get-out-of-jail-free card made them believe that no one would dare harm them. Seeing that Charles Saint still intended to shout after being kicked, Wood lost his patience. He grabbed a nearby bedsheet and stuffed it into Charles Saint's mouth, then took out his long knife and swiftly cut off one of Charles Saint's fingers. The celestial dragon couldn't scream due to the gag, but the intense pain caused his eyes to bulge and sent him writhing on the floor in agony. Hey, you can't be done already after just one finger? The game has only just begun. Think about what you did to those slaves. This is nothing compared to that. Holding the writhing Charles Saint down, Wood cut off another finger, muttering to himself. You must be pretty close with this Charles Saint. I wonder how many fingers it will take before you start talking. There's plenty of time, and if I run out of fingers, there are always toes. Hearing Wood's words and feeling the unbearable pain, Charles Saint realized that the fishman in front of him was a true demon. Is Charles Saint a tough guy? Or was he really that close to Charles Saint? Neither. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk, it was that his mouth was stuffed with the bedsheet. And every time he tried to remove the gag to speak, Wood would hold him down, thinking he was resisting, and cut off another finger. After several rounds of this, Charles Saint's hands were a bloody mess, and his consciousness began to fade from the excruciating pain. Just when Charles Saint was about to lose consciousness, the demon in front of him suddenly put on an apologetic face and said, Oops, sorry, I forgot to remove the gag to avoid unnecessary trouble and interference with our game. Now, can you tell me which area Charles Saint lives in? Seeing Wood's apologetic expression, Charles Saint realized that this fishman had been toying with him all along. But the pain of having his fingers cut off had crushed any pride he had. The fishman in front of him was a complete maniac, and if he pushed him too far, Charles Saint might really lose all his fingers. It wasn't like he was really close to Charles Saint anyway. Even if they had been best friends, Charles Saint wasn't about to sacrifice his fingers for him. Better to yield for now, Charles Saint thought, and he could always seek revenge later. With his status as a celestial dragon, how hard could it be to find a mere fishman? Chapter 60, Wood, I didn't actually kill you. Can you guarantee that if I tell you what you want to know, you won't kill me? Looking at the ugly fishman in front of him, Charles Saint felt that the fishman was pure evil. Others might hesitate because of his celestial dragon status, but this one clearly wouldn't. Don't worry, we fishmen keep our word, unlike you celestial dragons who are nothing but scum. Charles Saint couldn't be sure if Wood was telling the truth, but he had no other options. Either he chose to trust Wood, or he would continue to have his fingers cut off one by one. The excruciating pain he had just endured was unforgettable, and although Charles Saint was already plotting how to take revenge on the fishman, he decided to choose the former. After Wood obtained the information about where Charles Saint resided, he tied Charles Saint to the bed and stuffed his mouth again. Charles Saint watched as Wood did all this, and didn't struggle, thinking that Wood had indeed kept his promise. If Wood had wanted to kill him, he could have done so with one stroke, without going through so much trouble. Feeling relieved that his life was no longer in danger, Charles Saint began to plan in his mind how he would seek revenge against Wood. Simply making Wood a slave would be too lenient. The pain Charles Saint had just endured would be repaid tenfold or 100-fold. However, Charles Saint was not the protagonist of this story. He wasn't going to rise up and seek revenge like in the tales of 30 Years of East River, 30 Years of West River. After tying Charles Saint securely, Wood found the key and unlocked the chains binding the girl on the bed. One of the twin girls had already been tortured to death by the time Wood arrived. The surviving sister, upon seeing her chains removed, had a momentary look of disbelief. When she saw her dead sister, her eyes filled with intense anger as she looked at Charles Saint. Wood, noticing her reaction, handed her a dagger, another one of the luxurious items from Charles Saint's collection. "I'm sorry I arrived too late to save your sister. If you want revenge, do it yourself. I had to hold back from killing this scum several times." Hearing Wood's words, the bound Charles Saint stared at Wood in disbelief, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "I did keep my promise. I didn't kill you myself, but that doesn't mean someone else won't." The girl's hatred for the celestial dragons was deeply evident in the next scene, as she exacted her revenge in a brutally vivid manner. Charles Saint loved to play games, so the girl played one with him too. A bloody game. The chains are off, and with Mary Jo Eyes in chaos, now is your best chance to escape. There are plenty of treasures in this celestial dragon's room. Take what you can and live well, for yourself and your sister. Wood had stayed behind out of concern that the girl might not be able to kill Charles Saint in the end, thinking he might need to finish the job himself. However, it was clear that the traumatic experience had transformed the girl. The way she dealt with Charles Saint even made Wood shiver. "Benefactor, could you tell me your name?" "My name is Wood. I hope we meet again one day." On the way to Charles Saint's residence, Wood began to regret his previous actions. He was currently disguised as a fishman, but for some reason, he had impulsively given the girl his real name. Wood didn't think the girl would betray him, but it still left a trace of worry in his usually cautious mind. Little did Wood know that the girl he saved would one day become a significant figure on the seas, and that she would repay the kindness shown by Wood's name. Following the directions provided by Charles Saint, Wood quickly made his way to another luxurious mansion under the cover of night. Unlike Charles Saint, who was still indulging in his depraved games, Charles Saint's mansion was brightly lit, and two men in black suits were standing guard inside. "Has the slave rebellion been suppressed? I haven't even had a chance to break in the new batch of slaves I just bought. If anything happens to them, you'll be sorry." The slaves, including Hancock and her sisters, were first subjected to a simple taming process and branded with the hoof of the celestial dragon before being sent to the celestial dragons. With the fishmen causing such a ruckus, Charles Saint naturally worried about the condition of his new slaves. Unlike the slaves he had grown bored with, these were all new playthings, and among them was a mermaid he had spent a fortune to acquire. He wasn't willing to let anything happen to them. Bang! In his frustration, Charles Saint pulled out a gun and shot a maid who was serving tea beside him. As the maid collapsed into a pool of blood, the other servants around her trembled in fear, not daring to make any sudden movements. The two guards protecting Charles Saint were clearly members of Cypher Paul, the world government's intelligence agency, judging by their attire. However, they were not likely members of the elite Cypher Paul Zero agent, known as the world's strongest intelligence agency. Since Cypher Paul Zero agent officers typically wore white suits, not black. Although the celestial dragons were noble, they were not the only elite residents of Mary Jo Eyes. Cypher Paul Zero agent, being the best of the best, were as powerful as marine admirals, but their numbers were limited, so it wasn't possible for each celestial dragon to have one. It was clear that Charles Saint's status wasn't among the highest in Mary Jo Eyes, so his guards were not the elite Cypher Paul Zero agent. With two Cypher Paul agents guarding him, Wood's chances of bypassing them to directly take down Charles Saint were slim. Waiting for the right moment was not an option either, as time was running out. The chaos in Mary Jo Eyes was only because the celestial dragons never imagined anyone would dare attack them. Once the Marines arrived, the rebellion would be swiftly crushed. Given the limited time, Wood decided not to wait any longer. Gripping his long blade, he stepped out from the shadows, quickly closing in on one of the Cypher Paul agents. Chapter 61, You have too much faith in your iron body. The two Cypher Paul agents protecting Charles Saint were indeed not from the highest department, Cypher Paul Zero agent, but rather from Cypher Paul 3 agent. Compared to the more combat-focused Cypher Paul 9 agent, who generally mastered all the 6 powers, Marine 6 styles, Cypher Paul 3 agent was more like a reserve unit for them. While the agents in Cypher Paul 3 agent also learned the 6 powers, They typically only mastered some of them and hadn't fully grasped all of them like Cypher Pal 9 agent. A flash of the blade sliced through the night with a precise and deadly angle. One of the Cypher Pal 3 agents, who had been standing on guard with a serious expression, suddenly felt an alarming surge of danger. Instinctively, he used his most trusted technique, the iron body. Almost simultaneously, the blade's glow magnified in his vision, descending from his shoulder and extending all the way down to his chest. As the blade struck, the Cypher Pal 3 agent initially wore a confident expression. Although he hadn't detected the attacker's presence until the last moment, he believed that the iron body technique, which hardens the body like steel, would protect him from the sword. In the world of pirates, one should never be too confident in their iron body. This has become almost as much of a rule as the one in the neighboring world where Amaterasu never seems to burn anyone to death. Unfortunately, this Cypher Pal 3 agent didn't understand this principle, and his initially confident expression quickly froze on his face, transforming into one of shock. When Wood's long blade slashed into the agent's iron body, the sword unleashed a second wave of impact, sending a crescent-shaped slash outward, which directly sliced through the agent, sending him flying. A splash of blood arced through the air as the Cypher Pal 3 agent, using his iron body, was blasted dozens of meters away by the force of the attack. Learning the iron body doesn't mean invincibility. Even among those who have mastered all 6 of the 6 powers, the strength of the techniques can vary depending on the individual's physical condition. In that single strike, Wood's attack exceeded the agent's body's limits, causing the iron body to fail, leading to the agent's injury. It was as simple as that. Seeing his comrade sent flying by the slash, the other Cypher Pal 3 agent quickly reacted, extending his index finger and rapidly jabbing towards Wood. Finger pistol, whip. The rapid jabs in the air created the illusion of a whip-like arm. Given the current level of firearms technology in this world, most of the cannon fodder in the Navy still used single-shot flintlock rifles. However, the opponent's finger pistol technique was comparable to a machine gun's close-range burst. If it had been an ordinary person facing this attack, they might have been turned into a human sieve in an instant. However, what seemed like a rapid barrage of finger pistols appeared to be in slow motion to Wood. Every movement of the Cypher Pal 3 agent was broken down into frame-by-frame sequences in Wood's eyes. Ding, 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 ding. Unsurprisingly, the rapid finger pistol barrage was effortlessly blocked by Wood's sword, leaving the Cypher Pal 3 agent shocked. Tempest kick. Tempest kick, but just as Wood was about to counterattack, his observation hockey, alerted him, prompting a quick backward jump to dodge. Almost simultaneously, a blue crescent-shaped slash shot across the spot where Wood had just stood, barely grazing the ground. Because Wood dodged in advance, the Tempest kick missed him and instead struck a nearby wall, leaving a deep gash in the marble column. "Paul, are you okay?" The one who had launched the Tempest kick was none other than the Cypher Pal 3 agent Wood had initially ambushed. Although Paul's iron body had shattered earlier, it had significantly reduced the impact of Wood's attack. As a result, the knife wound on Paul's chest, while terrifying, hadn't entirely incapacitated him. He's a swordsman. Our Doriki, power level, is about the same, so avoid direct hits and don't rely too much on the iron body. External slashes and the ability to cut through iron are the hallmarks of a swordsman. The previous attack had confirmed that the opponent was indeed a swordsman, possibly an extraordinary one at that. "York, my body's injured, so my speed is greatly reduced. I'll focus on covering you while you take the lead in attacking. This fishman might not be an ordinary opponent. If we underestimate him, we might not be able to win." As soon as Paul finished speaking, he gritted his teeth against the pain in his chest and unleashed 2 scythe-like slashes with his legs. If he could, Paul would have liked to play dead on the ground, but he knew that York alone wouldn't be able to handle Wood. If anything happened to Charles Saint, both Paul and York, who were responsible for his protection, would face severe punishment, potentially even execution. The 2 scythe-like slashes from Paul's Tempest kick formed an X shape as they flew towards Wood. With a casual wave of his sword, Wood unleashed a blue slash that shattered the incoming Tempest kick. Although the Tempest kick can create sword-like slashes with a leg, it was no match for the true slash of a swordsman. Paul clearly understood this as well. He didn't expect his Tempest kick to easily defeat a swordsman.